I've got so many windows open here, of course, like everybody. I need like 4 big monitors so that I can, now I have to find my agenda page. Okay. All right. Got it. All right. So this is the virtual public hearing. And then we have a work session, and then we have a town council meeting. So, all right. So let me. We have 2. Are we doing 2 separate public hearings, Polly? Is that the way that this gets? This is how we proceed, or you're muted?
Yep, just saw that.
It would be
Thanks.
cleaner that way.
You should do 2 separate meetings, 2 separate public hearings, just so that they're segregated.
Okay. And do I just call them to order, or do we need a motion to open the hearing? And I know we need a motion to close the hearing.
You can just open it by yourself.
Okay.
I don't think you need a vote.
Okay. All right. Then I would like to open a public hearing to receive public comments on the fiscal year 2021 tentative budget. And Jen, you will manage the bringing people from the attendees to the panelist side if necessary.
Yeah, I'm going to allow them to talk. I have asked, it looks like we have 3 attendees right now, and I've asked them to raise their hands if they can do that. If anybody, oh, we have one. Okay, Darcy Watson, I am going to, you were first, so you should be able to speak to the council at this point. Hello.
Perfect, thank you.
Oh, Jen, I didn't raise my hand.
I do.
Oh,
Oh,
we
you
had a
did.
hand
Oh,
raised. You might have
John
hit it
did.
by accident. We'll
Sorry.
take you off for now then.
Take me off, thanks.
I'm going to go
Del
next to Del Draper. Del, you should be able to speak to the council now.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just sit tight. Thank you.
Okay.
And Ginny Marie has her hand raised as well.
Okay. Okay, Ginny Marie, we're bringing you in. You should be able to talk to the council now if you'd like.
Can you hear my voice? Okay, very good. I would like to just say at this time that I'm trusting all of you as our elected crew representing the citizens of Alta, that you will use your best entrepreneurial mind to seek and find a resolution that will be fair and just to the entire community. And I'm grateful that you're there today, and I'm sure you can. Thank you.
Can I ask Ginny Marie, this first public hearing is to receive comments on the fiscal year 2021 budget. Is that what you meant to be speaking to? I'm guessing you were talking about the UFSA boundary.
Thank you. I'm glad you clarified that. And yes, I would have been addressing the second.
Okay, so
Thank you. There isn't an agenda in front of me, so and I was not aware exactly of what your sequence was. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for, we'll keep that in mind, that comment in mind when we get to the second hearing, I think. Okay, so I'm not quite clear if the other public attendees are interested in speaking, or they just wanted to make sure we could hear them.
I am not interested in speaking. I'm trying to join into the UFSA meeting. Should I dial back in 15 minutes? Is that what I should do?
Well, you can, that would be fine, or you can stay on for an extra 15 minutes now. We aren't getting a lot of comments on the budget, it sounds like, so I don't think we will be doing this for another.
Mayor, I have a public comment that was submitted earlier from Mark Hake. Should I read that aloud?
On the budget?
Yes.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and we'll read that.
Okay.
please.
I would urge the town of Alta to allocate additional funds in the planning and zoning and water budget for professional services, surveying, engineering, and legal expenses for the purpose of future infrastructure, which will be required to deliver fire service and increased public transport needs. The existing fire infrastructure is pressure charged through potable water. Period. East Grizzly Gulch properties presently have inadequate fire flows, and West Grizzly and Albion Basin have none. The unserved and underserved properties should expect the town of Alta to plan for parity with the best existing infrastructure in town at a minimum. The best case would be a plan to upgrade the whole town. The 3 modes of public transportation upgrades currently being studied by UDOT will all require additional new infrastructure to provide adequate services to the increased number of residents, visitors. Mayor Pollard's administration consistently proffered the idea that anytime new utilities are installed, public or private, co-locating infrastructure should be a very high priority. The infrastructure required will of necessity include new and upgraded pipelines, upgraded pumping capacity, significant additional storage, new and upgraded sewer and water lines. The town of Alta must assemble and review current capacity and very near future needs and make a macro plan to deliver. The costs of locating all the existing infrastructure and potential storage sites will require some survey and GIS work, engineering expertise, and legal expense. Existing private utilities, infrastructure, and water storage sites not controlled by the town of Alta / Salt Lake City Public Utilities must inventoried and potential use explored to minimize impacts of the utilities development. Co-location of utility upgrades for electric, gas, phone, water, sewer, and fiber will be a key part of preparing the town of Alta for the future. The elected officials have failed in the past to set aside costs for adequate capital reinvestment in public infrastructure and have insufficiently funded planning costs. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sheridan, you had your hand up a few minutes ago, although.
Hi, I misunderstood what Jen was asking for, Harris.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm just making a note because Mark's message reminded me of something that I wanted to report on that I had forgotten to write down. Yes.
Mayor Sundak, is it possible just to have someone do a high-level summary of how the budget was put together, basically summarizing what changes were made to deal with, where are we cutting spending money to based on reduced potential revenues? And is there a way to, if revenues do turn around, is there a plan to bring some of that back online?
Okay. Piper, please pipe in here when you feel it's appropriate. There were a couple of so Mike, we are worried about this year's sales tax revenue. We do have some. We had a good year, even though we ended up 6 weeks early. So there is some carry forward unbudgeted revenues that will be applied to next year's budget. We did decide to make some rather as conservative assumptions about next year's revenues in terms of sales tax as we could make and have a budget that balanced today. If things are worse than our assumptions, we will have to make adjustments as we go. If things are better, we can also make adjustments as we go. So next year's budget freezes salaries for example, for the staff. So there's no increase there. Next year's budget cuts the town's contribution to the ACVB by 50% in terms of that expenditure. Those were, I think, and then in each department, we cut expected expenses on a number of items. So for example, we, even where our year-to-date was all of what we had budgeted, we still are cutting, small 10% from many of our line items, I would say. Let's see, in terms of revenues, we did a couple of clever things, I think. One was, and thanks to the staff for coming up with this, is the water fund that's paying, no, the sewer fund is paying the debt, right, Piper?
Sewer, yes.
Yeah, so both the sewer and the water enterprise funds, Mike, had debt to the general fund, but they also had a savings account. And so we decided to pay off the sewer fund debt. That's 60-something thousand dollars, if I remember right. And so that is helping us manage this year. In terms of sales tax, our budget was built on an assumption of zero sales tax revenue from July through mid-November, and then 75% of our 3-year average for the ski season. I understand from you that you're making some assumptions that are more conservative than that, but that was the only way that I could make the budget balance, was to assume that. So there's a little bit of hopefulness there. If things got better, I think one of the things I would do is try to make our staff whole in terms of the cost of living increase. And we would debate what to do about ACVB. Part of what is helping us balance this budget is that this budget assumes that we only need to continue to fund the UFA through the town budget through December. How was that, Piper? Was that kind of the highlights?
I didn't understand that last sentence about only funding through December.
On the town's budget. So UFA is in our budget for $78,000
yes.
Instead of 156, which is what
Yes, it seems accurate.
Or instead of 156, which would have been the adjusted for inflation last year's number, but we weren't going to get that for this year. So instead of it being 729, I think is the number, it's 78.
Yes.
And so that was a big help, Mike. What it did essentially compared to last year, it reduced it by half. Anything else? Or I think that's...
It seems that my connection is unstable, but that I was looking for the email that I sent out that had.
Yeah, I'm looking at that too. Yeah.
Decreases, but I couldn't find that. And yeah,
it was on 6/11 at.
Yeah.
Is when you sent that? Just if that helps you find it, at 7:13 p.m. Okay. We did also just move some money around a little bit because, for example, the sewer and water enterprise funds were not actually in the past paying for the amount of staff time that they were absorbing. So we tried to rationalize that process too. And then finally, there's a fair, like I said, there's a fair amount being carried forward from last year.
How much is being carried forward from last year?
Stand by, unless you know that number off the top of your head, Piper.
In the range of 130,000 from the general fund.
That's great. So Mayor Sondak, we have not made any predictions yet for the coming season. We're kind of still just kind of watching very carefully what is happening in the industry throughout the world. You know, recognizing, you know, a month ago when I kind of told you, we don't know, we have no idea. It could be 25%, it could be 50%. We don't know what it's going to be, if there's going to be limits on capacity or whatever. That we'll watch and learn from what the rest of the world is doing between now and probably August. And then in August, we will have to start making our projections and plans for what we think the season will look like at that point in time.
Okay, good. I was thinking about a relatively informal conversation that I had with you and another with Dave Fields, where I reported that we were making this assumption of 75% of our 3-year average. And if I remember, both of you would be happy with 75%, I think, as of a month or 6 weeks ago when we were starting this process.
Still would be.
Earnestly. Okay, fair enough. Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And I will keep you apprised as we learn, you know, whatever direction we think it is going, we will try to get that information to you as quickly as possible as we see what the impacts may be.
Yeah, thank you. I know that, you know, some people I know have just bought their Icon passes, but they are deferrable for a whole year if the purchaser so chooses. So I don't think that that's a great indicator yet of the kind of ski season we'll have. And similarly, I think many of the hotel bookings are solid, but I think that they have offered essentially refundable bookings for now. So, and just like the Alta Ski Lifts has extended the time for the early season, early purchase discount, I just think it's a little too soon to know. When we get into the regular meeting, I'll say something about resurgence of COVID and my expectations there. So, okay, are there any other public questions or comments about the budget? Otherwise, we can close this first public hearing and move on to the next.
Mayor, could you also ask for comments on the 1920 budget as well? I know there's two different budgets.
Yes, that actually is not noticed that way on our agenda. Is that something I can bring up, discuss, Polly, or?
I think if anybody wants to comment on it, there's no issue with them doing it now.
And it'll be part of our work session too, so we can also take some comments at that time, I think. But if anybody has, so we're going to do two different budgets. One of them is the essentially the end of year, although we don't have all the sales tax revenue, I don't think yet. The end of year, fiscal year 20 budget reconciliation happens now, as well as the adoption of a fiscal 21 budget. So if anybody has comments on the amended 2020 budget, feel free to bring that up now too.
Nobody's
Piper,
raising their hands.
Can
Okay.
I ask a quick question?
Sheridan?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Piper, I had a question about UDOT expenses that I didn't have a chance to ask you before the meeting. I apologize. And I've never been quite clear about this. Does UDOT pay us for the space that they use on town property that they park their equipment? And it just surprised me that it looked like an expense when I thought it was going to be a revenue line.
Piper, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Thank you. They do not pay us for, if you're referring to the space in the fire station, they do not pay for that. Are you?
And the space outside as well, like where their equipment is often parked next to the central building of the town where the post office is. And
Not pay us for that. My understanding, John might be able to speak to it, but I think the DOT helped build the firehouse. And so that was kind of an agreement that they would be able to use a third of it when it was built. That goes way back. And no, they do not pay us for using any space
Oh,
on the street.
Piper, our annual agreement with UDOT, the communications agreement, provides for use of the community center for equipment storage.
Okay, I
And it
apologize.
started when we built the building. When they chipped in when we initially built that building in order to use a bay for one of their pieces of equipment.
so that line that I see in the budget of an expenditure, and sorry, I can't see you guys and have that in front of me at the same time. I think it was $20,000. Sorry to put you on the spot, Piper. I didn't have a chance to ask you this before the meeting.
Chris, do you think that's 12 or 15,000
Well,
that they do the communications agreement?
It's 12 annually. Yeah, and we're signed into that for 5 years. I think we're in year 2 of a 5-year term or something.
And forgive my ignorance, can you remind me what that communications agreement is about?
It's
I believe it's for Alta Central to assist in their communications between the avalanche control groups and our marshal's office. And apparently it includes some of the community center bay for their equipment, but I thought it was all for Alta Central communications.
Sorry to spring this on you guys. I just was winnowing it and it wasn't clear to me what that expense was for.
It's good. We're supposed to know what this means.
Thanks, John.
Okay. Piper, I'm not seeing the 2021 budget in the materials you sent. I'm sorry. Maybe
It might have been sent the next day or later that day. I think it was sent that night, actually. Which night would that have been? Thursday?
Well, on the materials sent, let's see, there's the final budget. Anyway, oh, here, yes, I see. It is the next day. I beg your pardon. It's just labeled in a way that was, no? Oh, I see.
If it's,
No, I see. It just shows period from, okay, I got it. I beg your pardon, Piper. I see it. Okay. All right. Is there any further discussion of either the reconciled 20 budget or the 21 budget? Okay, then I would entertain a motion. I would invite a motion to close this public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, seconded, moved by Sheridan and seconded by Elise. Okay, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, Margaret says aye. Sheridan, I see a
Aye.
thumbs up. Okay, good. Thank you. And I say aye. All right. I'd like to open the public hearing to receive public comment on the town of Alta's intent to adjust the Unified Fire Service Area boundary to include the town of Alta. So is there public? I would imagine that there is, because Dell is still here with us, it looks like, for one thing, and he already said he'd like to speak on this. But if you would, please indicate by raising your hand and then Jen can unmute you. Okay.
okay, I just gave permission to Dell to speak.
Okay, Dell.
Thank you. Del Draper from the Secret Lake Cabin Owners Association. Jen, I don't see myself here. Do you have video or just audio?
You're just going to be on audio, Dell.
Okay. And I've sent in a letter And because there was a provision I saw in the Utah law that individual property owners could weigh in on this issue, I had all 9 cabin owners in the Secret Lake subdivision sign that letter. I think Piper's received the counterpart signature pages of 7 of those parties. Has that letter been circulated to the town council so they've had a chance to see that or not?
Yes.
Yes, it has been.
Okay. Well, I won't read the entire thing. I think the proposal to join the Unified Fire Service area is wrong-headed. I understand the town needs to take some action with the county subsidy going away, but to put the whole burden on property owners is really unfair and not a good policy decision. In a different situation, I can see using the property tax rolls for paying for these services. You'd have a situation where homeowners that make up the community would pay a large share of the tax. Renters would contribute through their rent as their landlords paid their portions. Businesses would pay. The homeless and those visiting or driving through would not pay, but would still be provided to those services. There's always a little inherent unfairness in tax schemes, but I can see the property tax in a typical community as being a relatively fair means to pass on the cost of groups like the USFA. In the town of Alta, this normal means of passing on these costs cannot be applied fairly if you use this scheme. Looking at the data of the use of the USFA services over the past 5 years, very small percentage of the calls relate to fire. With respect to EMT services, about 80% of the calls for service are directly related to serving skiers. About 2% of the EMT calls are from property owners, and there's about another 18% that are other. But if Alta joins the UFSA as proposed, all the costs of the EMT services would be borne by the property owners, despite their very low usage of the services. In other words, the property taxpayers would be paying 100% or nearly 100% of the cost of the emergency medical services, even though they would generate something along the lines of 2% of the need for those services. And the vast, vast majority of the services are incurred by visitors to the Alta Ski Resort. You know, as I said, in most municipal situations, there'd be nothing unusual or unfair by having the property owners pay for 100% of the emergency services. But the town of Alta is not your typical municipality. It's more akin to a company town that exists for the purpose of serving and supporting a single company. And it's simply not right that the property owners of Alta should pay for 100% or nearly 100% of the emergency services when they're only using something along the lines of 2% of those services. Anecdotally, in speaking with the cabin owners at the Secret Lake subdivision, no one can recall a single instance where EMT services were called to assist the cabin owners. No one can recall a single instance where firefighters services have been provided to any of the cabins in the 65 years that they've been there. And further, for approximately 8 or 9 months of each year, both in the past and going forward, it's physically impossible for the firefighting equipment or EMT services to even reach those cabins due to the snow and road closures. I'm not saying that the property owners shouldn't contribute to paying the cost of the required services, but I think those figures make the case how grossly unfair it would be to put all of that cost on to just the property owners. A solution needs to be found where the party that generates so much of the need for the EMT services at Alta, which is the corporate entity doing business as Alta Ski Lifts, pays a fair portion of those services, something along the lines of 80% of those services. The town of Alta should carefully review all aspects of municipal law to determine what mechanisms are available to charge Alta Ski Lifts Company for their proper share of their costs. And if you have difficulty finding those mechanisms, I think the town should enter in negotiations with Alta Ski Lifts and get them to voluntarily pay their fair share. I think the town has plenty of leverage here. It's a close relationship, and there are myriad places where Alta Ski Lifts needs the cooperation of the town. They should be willing to pay their fair share of those services. Lastly, I just want to briefly address the process whereby this decision is being made. This is some sort of boundary adjustment where the law provides that the boundary cannot be adjusted if a certain number of property owners or voters object to the adjustment. If that is law, I think the town of Alta ought to send a notice to each property owner saying this is about to happen and giving them the opportunity to weigh in. This matter has not been well broadcast. Somebody sent me their draft comments about 10 days ago, and those comments made reference to a letter written by the mayor on this topic. So I got on the website to look for that letter. It's not listed under mayor's letters for April or March. Those are on a different topic. I looked through the attachments to the town council meetings. I couldn't find it there. I'm not saying that letter isn't on the internet. It well may be, but I'm saying that with my mediocre computer skills and using 10 or 15 minutes, I wasn't able to find it. I think that's an example of how this hasn't been well broadcast. I think the matter is sufficiently important and has enough impact on the individual property owners that it warrants the further notice to the property owners. We've been shut down for the past several months. There hasn't been the opportunity for the normal social interaction, give and take, where people might learn about the proposal. And because citizens have been deprived of that opportunity to be with other citizens and maybe learn about this, I really think it's incumbent on the town of Alta to give another notice to the property owners and give them a chance to weigh in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Del.
Del, thank you. If you ever need to information that I have sent out, I am always happy to get a request directly and would send you that document. I could do it now if I knew your email address. Okay, I see one other hand. We're kind of going over time. If you can keep your remarks short, Roger, I would appreciate it, please. We did see some written comments as well.
Okay, am I online?
We're online, Roger, thank you.
Okay, I will keep them short. First of all, I want to say I really appreciate your holding these meetings virtually, because this is the way we can stay healthy. And I just got off a webinar with a bunch of scientists, and this is the way this virus spreads, is through people getting together indoors. And so you're keeping us healthy. I also want to compliment Station 113 and the Alta Marshal's office, and they're keeping us safe in other ways. We're really a lucky community to have them with us. So in regard to the plan to, or proposal to join UFSA, I think you've all seen my written remarks, so I won't really go over them, but just hit a few highlights. I'm not questioning how much the service costs, although I'm baffled by the fact that if you pay for it in two different ways, the costs are remarkably different, even though what you get is the same. So that to me is kind of bizarre, but I guess that's the way it is. I agree with Del that the cost of fire protection should be paid for by the property owners, because those are the people who are most protected by fire protection. But on the other hand, EMT services should not be entirely carried by property owners. These data of the last 5 years at the 80% of the call outs for EMT services are by our people in the ski area, and only 2% from our residents, is data I got from UFA. So that's not stuff I made up. That's the information that UFA has on these. So if the property taxpayers are paying for 100% of that, it really constitutes a subsidy to the lift patrons and basically the customers of Alta for from the property taxpayers, which I don't think is appropriate. I'd like to see a principle that those who benefit are those who pay. And I've suggested a small, basically insurance surcharge on lift tickets. And it turns out that if you charge a dollar or somewhat less than $1 per skier day, that will cover the cost of the EMT services in total. And you can figure it out. The point is that it's less than 1% of a day ticket to do that. And there's precedents for these kinds of insurance surcharges elsewhere in the world. I don't know of any of them locally, but I think that's something that really ought to be looked into to see how we could do that. Of the options that were outlined in the letter that Dell and Harris were referring to a couple of months ago, joining the UFSA is the least bad. And I'm certainly not advocating we adopt an even worse option, like staying with the UFA as currently structured. What I am advocating is we be creative and find an arrangement that is more equitable. That is using the principle that those who incur services are those who pay for them. And my strong suggestion is that we defer any decision to move to UFSA until we've really looked at these to see what other mechanisms can be created to make it a more fair system. Right now, this country is undergoing an upheaval because the rules and practices that we have been doing for a long time are really seen as unjust. And what we ought to do is not create a situation here where the rules and practices are unjust too. Let's make it happen in Alta. Let's be a leader in this area and work on making the rules lead to a just outcome, namely one where the services that are provided are paid for by the people who consume them.
Thank you, Roger.
Plus what I've written is what I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
And I should mention Dr. Engtel asked me to, on her behalf, second Roger's thinking as he put down in writing.
Okay. All right, is there anybody else who would like to make a public comment on our intent to adjust the UFSA boundary?
Harris, Mike Mon.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate the points about the ski area, but I'd also point out that the ski area currently pays all the users that come pay a sales tax, and those revenues do go to the town, and the town determines how those revenues are used. And they could be used for emergency services or whatever. We should also point out that Alta Ski Area could send all of its EMS people to Gold Cross and have another provider do EMS services, but that doesn't take away the cost of the USFA. They're still there. And by sending all of our injuries to Station 113, all of those people also pay a portion of those services when they use emergency services. So it helps to fund that also. If we did not send them there, then you would still have those costs and you wouldn't have anybody being funded for them. So it's kind of intended to work together to help provide those services. And the town has its resources or its options are property taxes and sales taxes for meeting its obligations, and you determine how they're allocated. And the reality, as it is, as you've pointed out, is we have had this this sweetheart deal, if you want to call it, for our emergency medical and fire support services within the town of Alta, and it's gone away. And so we need to adjust and figure out how to fund that. And our property taxes are lower than all others in similar situations, and so that's an area we can use to fund this, and we are supportive of moving in that area. But if you want to reallocate how you use property taxes and sales taxes to do some of that, that could be done. I mean, there's no reason why the town couldn't raise its own property taxes rather than a USFA and use its sales taxes to pay for its emergency services, and then it would have to use property taxes to pay for the rest of the services that the town provides for its residents. I mean, it's kind of you have this mixed ball of, you have a way to generate revenue and a way to spend it, and we are supportive of the direction you're going. It seems the most appropriate way to deal with this. It's the cheapest way to deal with this shortfall at this point. That's my 2 cents worth. I understand the concern that it's the visitors are coming and using these services, but at the same time, those visitors are contributing significantly to the budgets for the town of Alta.
Thank you, Mike. And what we have been doing, although it hasn't been as expensive, of course, but we have been paying for these services out of our general fund, which is contributed to by both property tax and mostly sales tax, as you have suggested. Okay, so I don't see anybody else raising their hand on this. We had a number of comments that have been circulated to the town council, and we will make them available on the record of this meeting for the public, I presume. Piper, yes? Yeah.
Yes, they are already posted on the website, I believe.
Oh, good. Okay, I didn't look at it again today. Okay, good. All right, so I would invite a motion to close the public hearing, the second public hearing.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Seconded.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of closing this hearing, please say aye. Or
Aye.
give me a thumbs up.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Okay. And none opposed, I think. I think I heard 3 voices say yes. All right. So now we've got 17 more minutes. I wouldn't mind if let's see if we can get a 5-minute break in here between these, the work session and the regular meeting. But to talk about any budget issues, either from the reconciled 20 or the new 21 budget that the town council members have for me and or the staff.
Is this part of the work session, Mayor?
Yes, I'm opening the work session.
Yep.
If I could make a comment, Mayor.
Please, Margaret.
Piper gave me a huge education lesson today and spent a lot of time with me going over both budgets, which I sincerely appreciate. And I apologize that I didn't have that knowledge before. But I believe I understand it better now than I did. I will not acknowledge that I have full understanding, but I'm better than I was. I still have some questions about how we're putting things into the 2021 budget. And there's some policy questions about the ACBB and whether maybe there's a better way to support our businesses than putting money into advertising for bringing people to Alta when we don't know if there's an Alta to bring people to. So maybe my comments really, Harris, aren't really for the work session and more for a comment on the resolution itself, but I'm happy to discuss them here or discuss them later if that's better time-wise.
I mute myself so that I don't create any feedback or anything, but then I forget to unmute. I think the idea of the work session, Margaret, is to, I mean, ideally what we would do is have this be a very short item during the regular meeting where we've come to an understanding of what we think ought to happen. So I would go ahead and invite your further comment.
Okay. So part of the question that I had about that in terms of ACVB is as I said, ACVB is in part an advertising mechanism to draw people to Alta, to introduce them to what we have and what they can do here. As Mike Mon has said, and as many of the hotels have said, no one knows what the situation is going to be in come November. I suspect Chris is going to talk to us about what our current situation is with COVID-19, and all the information that I've heard nationally is that as the weather cools, there will be an increase in cases. And so it seems to me spending money, even half of what we previously spent on ACVB, is potentially a waste of money that maybe we could support our businesses in another way that would not be as much. Maybe we get more porta potties to support the summer activities so that the people that are coming here have a place to help our watershed enforcement and other issues. So that's one. Sorry.
Okay, can I make a comment about that?
Absolutely.
One idea that I'm sympathetic to your concern for sure. And one idea that I have floated with, I presume, Chris, that you conveyed this idea, was that we wouldn't actually disperse this money in the first part of this year, that we would hold on to it, we would put it in the budget, and if it looked like this was a good and available. I mean, this is the single biggest discretionary expenditure that I can think of off the top of my head, and I've gone through this a lot, so I'd be surprised if there's a bigger one. And so if we get into a lot of trouble, we would not want to spend this money. And so I was not proposing to send them money monthly or anything like that, but to hold it back for now. And see how things develop. I think we're going to know a lot more in September about how things are going to develop than we know today. You're right, though, that it may be as late as October and November. This disease may be perfectly timed to create havoc for us. But I think that when the university starts and schools are back in session, we're going to learn a lot. It is always, so that's one point. Another is we do need to pass a budget in June, and that budget that we pass is always subject to amendment. And so there are going to be further opportunities, whether we don't disperse this money right away or not, to consider further the kinds of ideas that you're bringing up too.
I just wanted to make sure that when it's in our budget, I don't know what the background is and administratively, that we don't forecast a commitment that we might not be able to honor. So that, as you say, if we're holding it back and not committing to spend it monthly, then that potentially resolves the concern that I have that we only spend it if we've got it to spend. So, and the other question I had of a significant amount was the impact funds, whether there was a way to delay the feasibility study for the community center, which is 75K. I know it's coming from the impact fund, and Piper indicated to me that there was some time period on that it had to be spent or else, and I'm not sure what the or else is, but I'm just wondering is there a way to delay the spending or the incurring of that expense, both to keep that money in the budget, and secondly, to allow for additional people to be here to participate in it, if that's even possible. And I realize I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth to say, well, when there's more people here, and yet I'm saying there may not be more people here. So that's part of the concern there, because again, it was a big ticket item as well.
As you say, those funds are restricted to certain kinds of uses. And because this was an acceptable use, and because it seemed very open-ended about how long a delay it would need, it could be 2 years. And frankly, that would be past the end of my term in office. So I wasn't really excited about delaying one of my major campaign goals in running for office past the end of the term. So to be honest with you, that's why we put it in the budget. That plus it didn't have any real budget implications in terms of money that we could easily spend on other projects. It was not fungible money.
And also the water rates, we don't know yet, Piper. There was no resolution for us 14, so we don't know about a water rate increase for this particular 2021 budget as of at least today.
We do not have a resolution ready. Jen was working really hard on those numbers and sent me an email. I don't know if there is actually a suggested, a proposed water rate or not, because I did not have time to open that email. I apologize. Jen, can you speak to it at all?
Well, I have numbers, but I would like to have a second set of eyeballs on them before we present them to council, just to proof them.
It sounds like that would be something that we would need to consider an amendment to this budget at a later meeting. If indeed we need to. I mean, we do have in our, it's one of our ordinances, right? It's in our code that the water enterprise fund has to be supported by water revenues. And apparently that wasn't always the case, but we're going to endeavor to follow that ordinance.
Yeah, the only thing I can suggest on, I mean, we ran out of time. I know it sounds like we had all year to work on that, but things come up in the budgeting process where I learn new things all the time. One thing that was never included in the costs to run the water system are administrative costs of personnel time, employee time, Jen and myself, and also the infrastructure costs of the Cassell software software support. So when we got a new module last year, accounts receivable and cash receipting, we never added the additional costs of the maintenance costs of the support for that. It was something that I have included in the 21 budget. I think we ran out of time, and I think the only option today is to put that decision off until it's cleaner to do it every fiscal year, but we could start the rates at the beginning of the second quarter. So or I'm sorry, start billing July 1st and not make the rates go into effect until October 1st. Yeah, October 1st. So we would give ourselves 3 months to narrow that down.
Or could we, is it possible that you would have those numbers later this month that we could even do, since we're doing Zoom meetings anyway, could we do kind of a short meeting just to address that question before the time period so that the budget doesn't have to be amended again and again and again?
Yes, I think we could. Jen's nodding yes, I think we could.
I have the numbers that I think they're pretty good. From where I stand, they're good. So I don't think it's going to take much to get them ready for you guys to review.
Answer's yes.
Okay. All right. I'm going to move on to the second item on the work session agenda, which is the discussion regarding extension of Emergency Proclamation 1. Let me just say a couple of things about this. What Emergency Proclamation 1 does, and Polly, if you feel like I get any of this wrong, feel free to correct me, is that it creates, let's call it a legal container within which other proclamations that are substantive can be adopted and implemented. Mike Morey wrote in his staff report that he would like to see this continued because it allows, and Mike, feel free to weigh in too, it allows some coordination and faster response times in case we do need to. The state situation is still under extraordinary circumstances, I guess I'd say. You know, they still have their emergency orders in place. Polly, you had a suggestion about that some other towns have been doing something different than we've been doing the last couple of months. Do you want to explain that?
So I was consulting with some other towns, and what they've done is instead of extending the emergency proclamation every month, they just have a blanket extension that can be rescinded or terminated by either the mayor or the council. So it still gives the council full power to rescind it, as well as the mayor, if it's no longer needed. But then it doesn't have to require every month to make sure that it's extended and making sure that there's no gaps in the extensions. So I think it's a cleaner way to do it. It gives everybody the same power in order to, if it's no longer needed. And I also agree with Marshall Morey, that it's a good idea to have that state of emergency in place. First of all, it just notifies people of the town that we still are in a state of emergency, and it can allow us to act faster if we need to react to a condition that we're not aware of right now. And then also even something as basic as currently, for example, we're able to have this electronic meeting without an anchor location based on the governor's state of emergency and his order that's good until the end of this month. But it's possible the state legislature is looking at the next few days they're in session, I think, tomorrow and Friday. And one of the things they're considering is allowing municipalities to have meetings without an anchor location if there's an emergency. So if we had a state of emergency, we would be, if that goes through, we'd be able to do it. But it's just an example of powers that we may have by being in a state of emergency while we are dealing with this pandemic.
I find that last point about the anchor, not having an anchor location, fairly important along the lines of what Roger Burke was saying in his public comments in the previous part of this discussion. I am quite uncomfortable with the idea that in late August or mid-August, I'm supposed to be in a classroom for 4 hours with 60 executive MBAs. And as much as I admire and love all of my colleagues and friends in Alta, I don't want to be in a room with 60 of you either. Right now, it just doesn't seem like a great idea. So anyway, that's why that's on the agenda for the meeting next. We didn't really have a chance to discuss the pros and cons of it, but I think I should call the meeting to order here momentarily.
May I
don't
just
know if you-
briefly, Harris, weigh in on a couple questions that I had about the budget since we moved on so swiftly? I'm in support of what we're talking about right now, but also I wanted to say that I'm in support of the idea of hitting the pause button on some big ticket budgetary items, which I appreciate that we can do once we approve this, but particularly ACVB and also the planning monies designated for the town center, though I admire your efforts in trying to achieve that. I think there are a number of other things too that if we needed to, we could slash immediately. Who knows if we're going to need the monies designated to busing as well as our in-town shuttle. There's any number of other things too, but just the first two things I mentioned are roughly 150,000 right off the bat. Just wanted to throw in my support around that idea.
No, I think it's closer to 100,000, those two things. But I also think we have a contract now with INEAD, so I don't know, Polly, if you can give some thought to that. We can talk about it when we get to the budget item.
And I don't know
Okay.
if everybody saw it. Cliff is now on, but he's only on by phone. So
Yes, welcome,
Okay.
Cliff.
good, thanks.
I want to make sure, Cliff, you can hear us. I am not hearing Cliff.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you. Very good. And
Okay,
your
perfect.
little icon lit up too.
Terrific, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Cliff. Thanks for making the time to meet with us. Okay, I'm going to call the Alta Town Council meeting of Wednesday, June 17th, 2020 to order. We are holding this meeting virtually over Zoom. We have a number of attendees and a number of panelists. Okay. The first item on our agenda is citizen input. Let's see if anybody wants to address us this way. And I know, Piper, we do have some written comments, I think, that we should talk about too.
Yes, do you want me to read those?
Well, let me see if anybody who's live with us is interested in making any comments at this point.
Okay.
Not seeing anybody raise their hands, Mayor.
Okay. All right. Then Piper, what have we got for the town council meeting proper?
Well, we do have a citizen input that I neglected to get onto last month's citizen input. So I'm going to read that from Roger Burke. On the afternoon of April 17th, sorry, just disappeared. Sorry, darn it. Sorry, I'll try to get that back. Citizen input, Roger. On the afternoon of April 17th, 2 young males mistook our house for a snowboard launching ramp. Our neighbors, Crystal and Dom, called us to say that snowboarders were on our roof and also called Haley at Central. Margaret, Dom, and I chased them off and sent them down the hill. We alerted Deputy Mike Roach and messaged him pictures of the 2. Dom zipped down on his snowmobile to meet Mike at the end of the road. The culprits hid out until well after 10 p.m. when they skulked out to retrieve their cars, which they then started to drive away, lights off. Mike pulled up behind them with flashing red and blue lights, which brought an end to their escape plan. Mike gave them a good talking to, plus citations. The point of this story is that we live in a place where the citizens come together to help each other when the need arises. All played a role. Crystal, Dom, Haley, Mike. We are all lucky to live in such a community. That's from Roger Burke. And I have one.
Thanks, Roger, for those for those comments and the colorful story too.
Yep. Okay, general comment from Mark Hake, or general citizen input. The resolution number 2020 R11 before you today was clearly prepared by staff using bait stamped images from the Town of Alta versus Tolton et al. 3rd District case number 0309140055 production. Mayor Sondak should direct staff to prepare a USB drive for each TOA council member of the entire production, including the privilege log. This production is an invaluable tool to persons seeking to inform themselves of municipal affairs in the town of Alta utilizing the TOA public record, and this record should be distributed to anyone willing to bear the cost of a USB drive and 15 minutes of clerk time to copy. Mayor Sondak should direct the staff to assemble from the privilege log all the withheld documents regarding utilities and roadways and any other documents council members are interested in. And the mayor and council members should schedule a closed work session with the staff and council to review the import and meaning of the claimed privileged documents regards utilities and roadways in the TOA. Town of Alta is severely economically handicapped by the failure to engage in substantive long-term planning to serve the community with public infrastructure for utilities and roadways. When UDOT selects and implements a plan for transportation upgrades in Little Cotton Canyon, the demand on the utility infrastructure will increase. The following items will all be absolutely necessary to preserve the health, welfare, and safety of the community and reduce the risk of utility infrastructure failures at an awkward weather moment. Vastly increased water storage capacity, a loop system for potable water and fire protection, additional electric and gas capacity. All of these items are viable options for municipal entities. All of the foregoing has transpired next door at service area number 3, accomplished essentially by the same personnel as have run the TOA municipal infrastructure. Only the leadership has been different. And that's that.
Thank you. Is there another submitted, are there any other submitted public comments?
There was a comment received this morning regarding the UFSA. It was an email sent by Nick Besabrasov. It was essentially an agreement with Rogers. Sorry. Rogers points, talking points. It's one sentence. I will read that to you. First thing this morning, there it is. I support Roger Burke's request to defer the vote until more research into proper cost allocation is completed as previously promised. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you want, I know that there were numerous public comments related to the UFSA that we just had the public hearing on. Do you want, when we do that item at that point, maybe Piper could just summarize them? They have already been distributed to the council, is my understanding. And then Piper, have they been put up on the website?
Yes.
Ready? Okay. So they're already, so I think that's just the important thing. If anyone in the public wants to see those public comments, they've already been provided to the council, and if the public wants to see them as well, they could be seen on the website.
Okay, thank you, Polly. Okay, the next item on our agenda is number 3 is the Utah Local Government Trust Liability and Workers' Comp Insurance Policy 2021 rate update. And I think Greg Baumgartner is there to brief us on this.
I am here. Thank you for having me. Everyone hear me okay? I come to you from the beautiful fairways of Augusta, Georgia, so I wish. Anyway, well, thanks for having me today. It was my understanding that you were given our proposal that I'd given to Piper and John a couple of weeks back. So I hope you have those in front of you, but we were super happy to deliver the news this year that the town would be getting a 28% decrease on their liability, property, and auto costs for the year. So just that line of insurance alone will experience over $10,000 worth of savings for the year. So the trust has had a really good year. We've been extremely successful. We've added a bunch of new groups to the pool. We're very selective on who we add and when they come on board. So we've added over $2 million worth of new premiums in the last couple of years. And because of that, everyone in the pool benefits. So for those reasons and a few others, many of our members are experiencing some rate decreases. Couple that with your exceptional performance, loss performance as far as claims are concerned. The town was, I was extremely excited to give the news. So we hope you're happy with the results. Workers' comp also went down this year. So you kind of got the double whammy. Both workers' comp and liability down in the same year is a good year to celebrate. So everything else will be kind of status quo. None of the coverages have changed. In fact, we've added a bunch of new coverages to our arsenal here at the trust. So not only are you getting rate decreases, you're getting coverage expansions, which always comes as a pleasant surprise. So we're excited to be your partner still. I think our company has proven to be a model of stability. You guys joined the trust, I want to say like 10 years ago now. And I think the only thing that's happened is your premiums have gone down over time. So we hope we've been a good partner. You guys have been absolutely excellent to work with. Anything that we suggest or ask from your staff, they're more than willing to help and comply and get risk management at the top of mind. So we appreciate that and enjoy our partnership.
Thank you. John, do you want to weigh in here since you're the point person on this issue, I think?
I just wanted to say it really didn't cost us that much money to pay Greg to say all that. But they've been really, really good to work with from our end as well. So always available, always accessible. And I thought that our workman's comp was going to go up because we did have a couple of minor incidents, but we have a good history, and I certainly miss going up there with Piper and others to the trainings that they put on. They work really hard at the trust to make sure that we're thinking about safety and doing things the right way so that nobody gets hurt and nobody has to pay out any premium. So it's been really good, and I wish we would get a little bit more back to normal sometime in the near future.
I'll jump in and say that the feeling is mutual. We miss having people here to do the trainings. Nothing substitutes live in-person relationships. But to try and make up for that, we've uploaded everything that we've got onto our YouTube page. So anything that you guys need as far as trainings in the meantime, while we're kind of in this awkward stage of the pandemic, you can access on our YouTube page. Like I said, it doesn't fill in for live trainings, but it's the best that we got for now. So
great. And one other thing I would say is that a number of years ago, we were wooed by the trust, and we looked at it, and it was like the trust was young, and they didn't have a big fund, and we just thought there's no way, because we were going through a spate of land use lawsuits, and we just didn't think it was a viable opportunity. But that was many years ago, and it's been fantastic. So thanks. We need to look into the council as well. There's land use training, there's open meetings training, there's discrimination. Some of the trainings that are really important now, these guys have on their website. Utah Local Governments Trust has on their website. So we'll start looking into that as well.
So since you're here, Greg, if you don't mind, a couple of questions that are COVID related. We've worked really hard to keep only one person at a time in our office, and when they're in there, the hygiene is good, and then when they leave for the next person. I'm just wondering, is a workplace communicated COVID event insured by you?
So you're not the first person to ask. We get these questions all day, every day.
Yeah, I bet.
There's good and bad news. Good news is that for first responders, the legislature has changed how workers' compensation would handle claims like that. Always, forever in the past, and this is obviously something that's kind of uncharted waters in the insurance industry as a whole, because we haven't ever dealt with a pandemic like this before. But typically, a workers' comp, it's not even really an injury, for it to be a compensable workers' compensation claim in the past, communicable diseases were not included as part of those, because you can't really prove that you got a virus or the flu or whatever it may be while on the job. It was just virtually impossible to track it back, right? I know things are still changing. The first thing to change was the first responders assumption. So if a first responder is to contract the disease, now it's assumed that they got it at work, whether they did or not. Now that's how the law reads now, is that we just assume that they got it on the job, and we pay workers' comp benefits just like we would for any injury. For the rest of everyone else, it's still the same as it was before. It's just an untraceable communicable disease. Now that's subject to change. I know I've heard a few things going through that they're trying to change the assumption law for everyone, not just the first responders, but we're still kind of waiting that out right now.
Well, the contact tracing is a big deal from the state health department's point of view. So presumably they have some measure of confidence that they have identified where somebody did have contact and
right. And I agree with that. But as it stands today, just the first responders are assumed.
Okay. And then a similar question, but on the liability side. Communities that are opening up public facilities, are they subject to liability?
I mean, potentially, maybe you're subject to get allegations of anything at any time for whatever reason, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they'll win.
Right.
If you do get those type of claims, we'll run them through the system like we always would. Obviously our highest regard of risk management is just to follow the CDC guidelines as strictly as possible. It's your best defense and your best bet to say, hey, we were complying with everything required of us. Although it be open, we had everything in line to, defend any type of claim like that. So
CDC is rather than the state, or are you assuming that they're well aligned?
I'm sorry, your local authority, so the local health departments in your area.
I see. Okay.
Typically, they're trying to be hand in hand, but I know they're not always quite the same. So
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Do any of the council members have any comments or questions for Greg? No. Okay. Seeing.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Cliff, I want to make sure you're still with us and can hear us.
Thanks, Greg.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Greg.
Okay.
Thanks, you.
Cliff.
Good day. Stay safe, everybody.
Okay, you too. Okay, next item on the agenda is the Alta Ski Area update. Mike Mon, I still see your name.
I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to do a little update. We are actively working on the summer road, getting it ready to open. I believe we're scheduled to do mag chloride on the 23rd, targeting opening that summer road on the 27th. have the fee booth in place. Also trying to open the little campground type also. Campground itself will be subject to conditions. It may trail that just a little bit after that, or it may partially open. We haven't quite made that decision, working with the Forest Service on that. We have, as you've noted, we have started our season pass sales for next season. We, after evaluating all of the conditions with the shortened season and people not getting value, we ended up offering discounts to pass holders to that could be applied towards products for the next season, as well as extending purchase times, as well as a no questions asked money back guarantee through December 31st of this year for any unused passes. As I mentioned earlier, we're still kind of watch and learn from what's out there and how we as a country and businesses and communities move forward in responsible ways to deal with this virus going forward. And what exactly that means to our operation is unclear at this point in time. There's a lot of different things being tried, and some things are working and some things aren't working in other places. We hope to know enough information by August timeframe that we can paint a picture of what the conditions we would be operating under for the winter season. We also, you may have noted, we're also actively working on the second half of our Albion parking lot project, expansion of the east end of that lot and upgrading Sunnyside Pitch 1. The trail in the Albion Basin down out of the Albion Base is currently closed, and all traffic, foot traffic, is being routed through the Summer Road. We're hoping by that later, early July, we may be able to get that trail, at least the trail back up and operating. No plans to operate any facilities out of the Albion Base for this summer. I'm sure you're all aware, UDOT's come out with their EIS and their transportation alternatives. We have reviewed those as the ski lift company, and our preferred alternative with some adjustment would be the gondola approach. It's the one that provides additional ingress and egress, and it allows us to have some transportation, an alternative that allows transportation that's not dependent upon the road and is able to skirt some of the avalanche issues. So we're encouraging everyone to read it, make their comments, and we'll see where that goes with UDOT. That's a longer term solution. We are concerned about the short term too. What do we do between now and then? As was noted the last couple of years, we've got over the tipping point on parking, and we're actively working on how do we address that in the short term until we have some of these longer term alternatives come into play. That's kind of update from the ski area. Any questions or concerns or information you'd like us to know or be looking at?
Mike, hi, this is Cliff Curry. Excuse me, could you please say again the next date that out the ski area plans to update winter operation plans?
We will be looking in August. We're monitoring what's being done in summer operations throughout ski areas. We're watching what's happening in places like amusement parks that have similar type issues. We're watching what's happening in the Southern Hemisphere and other ski areas, and also monitoring what's happening in within our country with the spread of this pandemic and how people are dealing with it. And for this time being, rather than spending a lot of time coming up with our plan, we've decided to watch and wait and collect that information. And then in August, we would like to, after we've kind of have an idea, have a meeting with the broader Alta community and share maybe our thoughts and also take input and thoughts from others, because we're all in this together as we try to go forward to try to keep our, do something that's sustainable and makes some sense and is as and minimizes any future spread of this virus at the same time. So it needs to be a community-wide effort, I believe, and we want to be participants in that process.
Terrific. Thanks.
Mike, might I ask a little bit about the upper campground? When I
Yes.
went for a stroll through it a few weeks ago, I saw a lot of trees had been chopped down, and they look like healthy trees. I was kind of startled. Can you speak to that?
The trees that were cut down in the campground were just hazard trees, as defined by the Forest Service. There were some of the other healthy trees that may have been cut down. We had approval from the Forest Service to cut some trees for the Devil's Castle Road project, and also some trees. We are cutting some healthy trees along lift lines that have become hazards. And also there's a little bit on Lower Rabbit, some trees that were approved to taken out, which should be the healthy trees. Most of the trees in the campground, unless they were deemed a hazard and a healthy tree, most of those should just been dead trees that were pulled out of the campground. But there are some that were designated as a hazard because of where they were, their leaning, or their health.
Okay.
So we do evaluation every year with the Forest Service. And part of our forest management plan also is the subalpine fir species in particular. We're trying to actively remove some of them each year from the forest and continuing to plant, 1,300 trees a year to try to replace them with a better, more healthier species of a tree. The fir, that we use the Douglas firs or Engelmann spruces.
Thank you.
It's the firs that are subject to the, Chris, you always remember the name of this particular.
Yeah, that balsam woody, whatever that thing is.
Yeah, the woolly balsam agelid, right? Or something.
Balsam woolly adelgid.
Okay, adelgid, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing. And unfortunately, we haven't seen much of that in Alta yet. It is in Big Cottonwood Canyon. We're hoping it stays out of the Albion Basin and out of the Little Cottonwood Canyon, but it could make its way here.
Mike, I had a couple of questions all kind of related to summer. This is Margaret. The last time we Zoomed, you talked about waiting to hear from the Forest Service in terms of capacity numbers, and we're waiting to see what they were going to suggest about that in terms of trails and parking and whatever else. So that's one. And then also toilets, the porta potties with nothing being available at the base at Albion in terms of toilets. And then also the summer program, once the road is open, are you going to charge for people coming through that are parking at the residence of the basin, which you did not do last year? And the last question related to the ranger. I think the town is budgeted for a ranger again this year, and I understand that the ranger that we can expect this year will not have enforcement capabilities, which is what we paid for last year, and that cost more than a non-enforcement capable officer. So the question is, if we're paying this year, are we getting additional hours, or how is that being handled?
Okay, thank you. I don't really know the answer on if we're getting additional hours on the ranger or not. You are correct. It's not the ranger that are providing for the summer does not have the law enforcement side, cannot write tickets. So how that's being worked out, we would have to find out. I can ask and try to find out a little bit of information. I do not know the details of that deal, what's changed. I just know that, like you, we are contributing some money towards payment for that ranger to be here. Let me find out some more on that. We do not plan to charge anything for residents going up into the the basin, same with cabin owners. It would be the same, it should be the same as last year. We're charging for visitors that are going up to use those services that are there. We are planning to provide porta potties up in the Grizzly lot for the people that would be the primary flow for people going up there. So we're putting, I think we're putting 2 up there. And if we have to add a 3rd, we will. We'll see how they're being used. Right now, I believe we just have a handicapped one down by the town water system, and that would be moved up closer to where the fee booth will be. We may be in a position that partway through the summer, we may be able to open up some public restrooms at the Albion base. We're working through that. We're also remodeling some of them so that they may not allow us to do that. Did I miss anything?
Mike, question for you about that. What's the hygiene protocol you're using on those porta potties?
We are leaving that in the hands of the provider of those porta potties. We're trying to stay out of that part of it. So they come in and they're doing the servicing of those.
Do you know on the schedule?
I think it's like twice a week. Mm-hmm. They will not come in any more frequently than that. We are the restrooms that we have at the Secret Lake Trailhead and at the Catherine's Trailhead are under our care. We're cleaning those daily, probably multiple times a day, using our campground host to help us with that.
Mike, the 4th question was because at the last meeting you said the Forest Service was going to tell you capacity in terms of trails, and so that was the last question.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. The Forest Service has not come out with any capacity guidelines. They have said it's their concern more is all of their trails are open. Their concern is trying to support the restroom facilities. And given that we're taking care of the restroom facilities on our end, it's not an issue for them at this point in time. We do intend to do what we did last year. We'll only let the amount of vehicles up into the basin that there are parking spots. There is one issue, Harris, that you should be aware of in conjunction with this little campground store, which is a grab and go, items, no prepared foods, but just that you can grab and go. We had proposed or considered putting a little hand wash station in the area of the store, so people could, that were hiking the trail or whatever, maybe they could fill their water bottle in that location, but have also some hand washing. And when that was proposed or put into the mix, Salt Lake City Water, Laura Briefer, sent me an email and said we were not authorized to do that. The campground is not authorized we can't use water from the campground to support a hand washing station. So it seemed like the right thing to do, but it looks like we're not going to be allowed to do that.
Yeah, I can follow up with Laura on that question.
That'd be great.
I suppose that you could put some kind of sanitizer there, even so, but
we plan to have sanitizer. The problem is you only use sanitizer so much and it starts to dry your hands out.
No, I know it's not the preferred solution. I actually needed to talk to her about something anyway, so I'll follow up.
We're more than willing to put that there, but if they don't want it there, then that's fine too. We'll work around it.
Well, the other thing is, doesn't ALFS have 2 hand sanitizing stations for the work that's going on there for the workers in those 4 porta potties? Is that kind of thing, and that's probably serviced by the porta potty company, but is the water coming from ALFS for that?
Yeah, I'm not sure how that's being. I think the porta potty company is servicing those. I don't know that they have if they have like a reservoir that water's in, or if we're filling them from water. I'll have to go look. I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know they have hand washing stations.
Yeah, I walked by and there was a gentleman washing his hands like you had last year, I think down in the Wildcat lot, that there was a station there where you could get actual water in addition to just sanitizer. So
Right.
that's all.
I mean, it seemed kind of, it seems like we could make one like that, but I don't understand Laura's, whether we walk up and we take a 5-gallon jug up and we fill it up with water and then dump it into the station versus I run a water line from the campground water system and hook it to it. So it's all taken care of. Didn't seem to be a big issue, but apparently for them it was.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Okay, the next item on our agenda is approval of the consent agenda. And I'm going to have a comment there also, but is there,
I move
and the treasurer's report and the staff reports. I beg your pardon.
I move that we approve the consent agenda and all of its components.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? The next item is the questions regarding departmental reports. I'll hold off until after this vote. So, okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Cliff. Okay, thanks, everybody. I heard all ayes and no nos. So that is, we can move on to the next item, which are questions regarding the departmental reports. Mostly, I don't actually have I have a comment and something to report, I guess. After, as you read Mike Marshall Morey's report, he talked about on the, was it the 30th of May that you were alerted for the mutual aid? It was the 30th, right? Yeah, for events in Salt Lake City. And I just wanted to say a couple things about that. Of course, that got my attention and was somewhat concerning for a number of reasons. And Mike and I spoke about it probably around 5 or 6 p.m. that day, I think. Our police would not be deployed in the midst of civil unrest. What they would have done is they would have backfilled for UPD at the south end of the valley. And partly that's because of we don't have the kind of equipment and I'm glad that our police officers wouldn't be put into that kind of situation. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And another thing I wanted to say is that after that event on I think it was the Monday, Mike, the 1st, I think, that you and I had a fairly long conversation about Alta's use of force policy and policing training for difficult situations. And I am proud of our police and proud to be able to say that I think we have a true community policing experience where our police officers know our community members know our police officers and trust them. I just want to give you a chance, Mike, to kind of summarize our conversation if you feel like doing that.
Sure. Can you all hear me? Yeah, I'm gonna maybe try and summarize that. The mayor asked me to maybe give up to 10 minutes or so on this. And I'm gonna apologize to you all if this comes across as a speech. Let me start by saying none of us at the Marshal's office are okay with the events leading to Mr. Floyd's death. We never could be and we never will be. I do believe that it's right and proper for the country to be asking questions
finding good answers and finding solutions. I wanted to say a couple of things just anecdotally. I've approached our police staffing, with the mantra that it's better to hire the right kind of person and train them to be a cop than to hire a cop and train them how to be the right kind of person. I want to be clear here in the fact that I'm not saying cops are bad people. I'm just saying that we really put a lot of emphasis to putting the right people in our patrol cars. And in fact, on a personal level, I do believe the vast majority of officers have good hearts and good motivations. Our community needs and thrives by having deputies that are committed to having a personal connection with the town and that find positive outcomes when we're called on. I want to share a question that I first heard when I was a young officer myself in a training class, and please think about what your answer would be to this for a few seconds. And that question was, what's the biggest single event to have affected law enforcement's relationships with the public? And I was surprised at the answer that I heard, and I think about it all the time. And the answer was the invention of the automobile. In the old days, cops walked a beat, knowing and interacting with everybody on their beat. We knew your family, your struggles, your worries, your concerns. We knew where the bad guys lived. We knew where they operated. We knew where they hung out. People knew us, came to us with the information we needed to keep the block safe. I'm very proud to say that in Alta, we know what that kind of policing is like. We have a lot of benefits being a police department for a small town. We know you, you know us, probably by first name, I would imagine, in almost every case. We walk in your business, visit in your yard, we chat alongside the highway. We're obligated to our community. We can't just hand off a business card after a burglary investigation and say, somebody's going to be in touch with you here in a couple of weeks. Chances are we're going to see you tomorrow. And when we tell you we're going to do our best, you're going to hold us to that. And I think that's a good balance. And in no particular order, I want to talk a little bit about police use of force and de-escalation, because it's everywhere that you look right now. Generally, the use of force is governed by three things: federal mandates and law, state mandates and law, and department policy. As of the first of this month, I've been employed with our office for 30 years. In those 3 decades, I want to give you some statistics. The number of times chemical irritants have been deployed against a person in Alta, 0. Baton strikes against a person in Alta, 0. Taser and conducted energy device usage, 0. Gunfire directed at an individual, 0. Officers investigated for improper use of force, 0. Complaints of excessive force, 0. Complaints of racial bias, again, 0. And I'm damn proud of those numbers. We have, however, used force in effecting arrests, in executing warrants, and in defense of human life, including our own. Even as a military veteran who's seen combat, some of my most terrifying moments have been being a lone police officer in Alta, engaged with an armed or violent offender, knowing any help I'm going to get is a long ways off. There's what we refer to as the continuum of force. It includes our mere presence. It's the trooper on an overpass. That keeps 80,000 cars an hour from speeding because they don't want to be the guy to get the coupon. Above that, our verbal commands and persuasion. When needed, physical controls, impact weapons, energy devices, chemical irritants, less than lethal tools such as beanbag guns. And at the top of that continuum is deadly force. In Salt Lake County, We are all signatories to what's called the Officer Involved Critical Incident Protocol. I'm a member of that continuum. We've got 3 specialty teams that anytime a police officer is involved in a deadly force encounter or an in-custody death of any person, the protocol teams are activated. One team is trained out of West Valley City Police, the other Salt Lake City, and the third out of Unified. Anytime a team is deployed, they're vetted to make sure that no conflicts exist, friendships, previous work histories, anything like that. As they deploy, investigators from the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office deploy with them. There's a lot of oversight. There's a lot of investigation. There's our internal investigation. There's the OICI team's investigation, and ultimately the district attorney's findings. Wherever possible, our goal is always to use the least degree of force required to safely bring an offender into custody. Force de-escalation is not just a training or topic or buzzword for us in ALTA. It's actually a key to our survival in an encounter. We generally have 1 deputy on duty at a time. Our closest backup is often a long distance, a long time away. We train as best as we can to this reality by doing these things, not overcommitting to a bad position. We train to take a good look and think, hopefully communicate and negotiate if needed before we even arrive. We use the one-way nature of our canyon to our advantage. If you're going to run, you're only going to be able to run one direction, and we have tools for that. We use time and distance as an option to contact if the situation allows. We wait it out. We do it from far away if we think the hazard is present. One of our tactics is considering not arresting an individual if their identity is known, there's no threat to the public, and apprehension can be made later in a safer environment. Everybody that works for me is probably sick of hearing that at the heart of our core values is do it because you should, not because you can. Everybody that works for the Alta Marshal's office knows that's the first words that come out of my mouth. And I'm proud to say that I've heard it be the first words coming out of theirs as well. Despite this, there are times where immediate action is necessary. We know that. We've got, I believe, a good track record with it. This is where good policy and training are so critical. And I'll be honest with you, we need more of both. We've been lucky for a long time, and the world's changing. And even as a little 4-person department, we've got to change with this world. For years, I've lobbied for a better police policy manual. What we've had wouldn't pass by anybody's standards as a way to run a police department. The resources required to create a defensible manual are significant. It must incorporate state and federal requirements, law enforcement best practices, and agency-specific policies. Mayor Sondak has understood this as my priority since his term began. He and the town budget committee have recently given us the means to employ a company called Lexipol to develop a very comprehensive police manual. And they've got subject matter experts, lawyers, police trainers, you name it, at our disposal. And they keep us up to speed. When the legislature hands something out, I get a policy update that day. And we're able to get it out into the field to our people. Our construction of the manual is underway. I will tell you honestly, I'm behind on that. The COVID crisis and our very big winter took away some time that I needed to devote to that. I'm committed to finishing that. The first policy I have issued from that manual is police use of force. And it's a big policy. It's 7 pages long. Our deputies have all acknowledged the policy and agreed to abide by it. I'm happy to meet with anybody anytime to go over the intricacies of the policy. Want to read one line out of the introduction to this that I know is important to us all. And that line is, "This department recognizes and respects the value of all human life and dignity without prejudice to anybody." That's stated several times in our manual. That's right up front in our use of force. And by God, we'll live up to that. Let's see. I am available to talk. I'd ask you to get a hold of me with concerns or ideas. We know we can improve. We know we have shortcomings. We're your police department, and we exist to hold up our end to do right by you. Again, that's, I guess, a speech. But when I was asked to comment, that's where I ended up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I'll just add one little footnote. I'm pretty sure that your use of force document includes a duty to intercede if an officer sees another officer using more force than is needed or is legal.
As a matter of fact, it does. And that's the first sentence after the one that I just read to you.
Okay, yeah. So I just want to say, Mike, I really appreciate the work you do for the town, and your wisdom and leadership of that force is exemplary. I know that I often come to you with questions about doing my job, and I have a lot of confidence in the advice you give me and the job that you do.
Thank you.
And I want to acknowledge that, as I said, I had this conversation with Mike right after the events in Salt Lake City, and I satisfied myself about these issues with our police force. It was a conversation with Sheridan that made me think that taking some time in this meeting, which is why I had so much time for the questions on the staff report. So thanks, Sheridan, for the conversation you and I had about this issue.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, so let me open it up to the other council members about if they had any questions regarding the departmental reports. Okay, hearing none, and I want to make sure that Cliff, since I can't see whether you're nodding or not, I just want to make sure you are asked specifically.
No questions, thanks.
Oh, okay, thank you, Cliff. Okay, then the next item on our agenda is the UFA report from Jay Torgerson. Captain.
Hey, good evening.
Chief, excuse me.
That's okay. Just Jay's fine. Thanks for having me tonight. Just wanted to review a couple things and answer any questions if any of you have some. Wanted to update you on our COVID-19 strategy and where we find ourselves right now. It's been an extremely busy 3 months for us, but it's been busy managing this situation, providing training to our personnel, coming up with policies on how we respond, making sure that we have adequate supplies and PPE for now and into the future. So it's been busy with all of those things. Our crews in the field experienced a drop in call volume initially. That is picking up as things are opening up, and as schools are out now and people are out getting hurt, our call volume is back to right around normal of where it's been in the past few years for the same time of year. Our personnel has transported hundreds of suspected COVID patients, have been exposed to hundreds of suspected COVID patients, and luckily we've had very limited illnesses because of that. And I think it's because of the training that we've provided and the diligence that is being followed by the personnel in the field. They're doing a great job treating people effectively, making sure that people are getting the care that they need, but yet protecting themselves while they're providing that care. So for the first about 3 months of this, we only had one of our firefighter EMTs that tested positive. It was likely not work related, but was likely travel related. So we had great success and great luck up until about Memorial Day weekend. And at that time, we had one individual in one of our stations that got sick, not able to really trace if it was work related, but unfortunately, prior to knowing that they were sick, they worked in a station. The crew that they were on were involved in training with other crews, and so it required an extensive contact tracing to see who all may have been exposed to this one individual. So we ended up testing almost 60 of our personnel just to make sure that we were being safe and we weren't going to spread it to people that called us for help or spread it among other crews. So with that testing, we isolated people, we put them on leave as needed, and luckily it only spread to 7 total individuals, but that's, to us, that's significant. All 7 had contact with one another in that one station. Luckily, it didn't spread with training to other stations. We were able to limit it there, and were able to isolate those individuals, had them off for 14 days so that they could recover.
Are they okay?
Yeah, everyone's fine. Everyone has recovered. And as of today, I believe everyone except for one individual is back to work. So, and that one individual is feeling fine. We're just waiting for those 14 days and a negative test result to come back before they'll be freed up to go back to work. So we were able to jump on things really quickly. It was just another message to us that we need to stay diligent. We need to make sure that we're using all the protective measures that we have in place. And I think we're going to have some of these bumps in the road occasionally, and we'll do our best to manage them as they present themselves. But I think we're doing a good job overall. We still have a team that's focused on this. We meet on a weekly basis to talk about what is happening, to look at the numbers that we're seeing across the state as well as here in Salt Lake County. Those numbers worry us. We're seeing not necessarily a decrease, but an increase in some of those numbers. And so we're worried about all the exposures that may have taken place during the holiday weekend a couple weeks ago, and then the demonstrations and protesters with a lot of people are all together in one place, and that worries us. So, we will continue to take measures and keep an eye on things and keep our people safe, as well as being able to respond to the citizens in the areas where we serve. So I think we're doing a good job, and so far we'll hopefully continue in that direction. Any questions specifically for COVID?
Jay, have UFSA personnel been on standby during those protests, or is that mostly Salt Lake City personnel?
So mostly Salt Lake City personnel, but probably similar to what you expressed with Mike, with his team. That one, I think it was a Saturday where it got really busy in downtown Salt Lake. We did not respond to the downtown Salt Lake area, but we did respond, and we were utilized to backfill some of the Salt Lake City stations so that we could handle any calls that they had while they were working in the downtown area. So we were involved to that extent, but did not get involved in any of the protests.
I had a question, Jay. This is Margaret. Typically, the fire station is kind of a safe house for people that have whatever abuse issues perpetrated on them. Is that still available with COVID or not? Or how are you handling that?
No, of course. I mean, we have limited visits to the station, so we're not doing station tours. We're not doing any kind of ride-alongs outside of our own personnel needing training. but we would always be a place of refuge if anyone is needing help. We would take anyone in and make sure that they had a safe place to be. Absolutely. We do our own assessments every 12 hours at the station. We do a health check for all of our personnel. So monitoring if there's any changes that they have during a shift. That's something that we do in our main office as well. So a lot of our personnel that work in our main office are working remotely. They occasionally come in, and for those of us that are working in the office, we're assessed upon entering the office to make sure that we don't have any kind of symptoms. And we're just making sure that all of our personnel know, please don't come to work if you're feeling sick. Let's figure out what it is first, and we don't want to expose anyone else unnecessarily.
I'll note that I have not been to well, there was one time where I stopped by at the EOC, and it's pretty well cordoned off down there. And but the UFA board meetings have been like this, online. Although at yesterday's meeting, the chief floated the idea of meeting in person in July, a month from now, and about half of the attendees were receptive to that idea, and half were pretty unreceptive to that idea, I would say. So I don't know what's going to happen yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure as far as those types of meetings. We are, once we had exposure at that station that I told you about, we discontinued any kind of multi-company training for a period of time to make sure that everybody was healthy. We are going to reconvene, allowing different stations to gather to train. However, it will be outside training. They'll maintain their social distances and continue to wear masks if they are in near proximity to one another. And we are telling our personnel that they need to be wearing face coverings anytime they're out in public. When they go to the store, maintain your social distance. So we're trying our best to be good examples of that and to make sure that that's happening, not only when we're out and about, but also when our personnel are in the station together. They're trying to have good hygiene, making sure that they're maintaining distances and trying to keep each other healthy.
Yeah, when I see your guys at the Smiths, they're keeping distance, and I know that it's the police who get teased about eating donuts, but your guys could have better diets too, probably, Jay.
Probably so. So just a couple other updates as far as UFA budget process is moving forward. Because we know that, we're facing budget shortfalls and constraints. And so with the budget process, any kind of market or CPI adjustments were eliminated. So we're not having any adjustments as far as that goes for the coming year. They reduced the member fee increase from 4% to 2%, and just trying to be efficient in all the things that we do. I know in my division, I've been asked to be as efficient as possible. Eliminated a couple positions within my own division, putting them back out into more of an operational role so that we could save some money and try to be efficient and responsible with the taxpayer dollars. Couple of just other things related to our call volumes in the Canyon. First quarter call volumes, I think I had indicated this at the last meeting. The first quarter, we saw 64 calls to the town of Alta. Second quarter to date, 6 calls total. So that's from the 1st of April through current. So six total calls. We postponed any of our water rescue training as trying to limit people being close to one another, but that is scheduled to reconvene the end of this month. And then Station 113 is one of the water rescue stations, and so they'll be participating in that water rescue training towards the end of the month. So again, I mentioned it last month. As you all know, if you're out and about, you see how high the water is running in Little Cottonwood Canyon, and we're just wanting people to be careful if they're around the water with their kids or their pets.
Jay, do you happen to know the number of calls to the other parts of the canyon from 113 in those 2 quarters?
So the total call volume for other areas within the county?
Well, no, the canyon from Station 113 and its primary first due area.
I can get that information. I don't have that information with what I pulled prior to this meeting, though. So I'm not sure how many. So those calls that I talked about are specific to Alta. So
Yeah,
I'm not
no,
sure.
that's how I understood you. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
I was just wondering, since our usage is really, while there are raw numbers, it's also a percentage of the use of the station. So that is accounted for. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Jay, or were you're not finished? I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to just make one comment, having listened to the work session and the meeting so far, and just, I really appreciate everyone's input and thoughts, and I know that you are supportive of UFA and the things that we do, and I know the decision-making process for you all moving forward is not necessarily related to the service that you receive, but it's how to pay for that service. And so just know whatever decision you make moving forward, we're committed to still be involved and engaged in your community and provide you with the best service that we can. But in addition to that, I tend to look at things pretty simply. The cost of Station 113 does not change based on the number of calls that we respond on. It's a static number. And so I think for me, I look at that as if I'm a taxpayer, you are not paying for what you receive, you're paying for what you might receive sometime in the future. So it's not something that you can pay for based on when it's used, but it's something that will always be available to you no matter what your need is. Hopefully you never need it. I've never had to call 911 in my time on this earth, and I hope to never call 911. But I appreciate knowing that if I do have that need, it's there, and that's kind of how I look at it. So I know you guys are all wrestling with how to decide on who or what and how to divvy up that cost, but that's kind of how I look at it for what it's worth. If I can answer any other questions, I'm happy to try.
Thank you, Jay.
Yep. Thank you.
Oh,
Okay.
I had a quick question. Sorry. Forgive me, Chief, chiming in late. I just had a question about the relative cost between UFA, UFSA, with regard to reimbursement for ambulance rides. If citizens have insurance and then they reimburse directly to UFA, is that correct?
So I guess that is a good point. Let me just tell you. So in one of the comments earlier in the meeting, we were talking about cost of the EMS service. And so when we transport a patient, there is a cost associated with that, and that patient is billed for that transport. So ambulance service in the state of Utah, for us to bill for an ambulance transport, we follow the guidelines that are set forth by the Bureau of Emergency Medical Services. So it's the state of Utah Department of Health that dictates what we can charge for an ambulance ride. And all ambulance service providers charge that same rate. So just for your basic knowledge, for a paramedic transport, doesn't matter where it is in the state of Utah, a paramedic transport, you're allowed to charge $1,535. That's the flat rate that you're charged as a patient that utilizes an ambulance for what's considered a paramedic transport. An EMT transport, which is somebody with a kind of a lower medical certification, is $795. In addition to that, we are able to charge for mileage from where we pick a patient up to where we drop them off. So mileage from wherever they're picked up at the accident site to the hospital is added into that, as well as a fee for any supplies or medications that are utilized during that transport. And all of those rates are set by the state of Utah. So there's not one ambulance service that does it cheaper than another. They're all set by the state of Utah, and we're bound by those numbers that the state sets. So it doesn't matter what ambulance service it is, whether it's UFA, Sandy Fire, Gold Cross, it's all the same rate that we follow for those transports. And so that is something that is passed on to the user. So when somebody is transported from, if it's from a clinic or from the side of the highway down to the hospital in the valley, they receive a bill for that transport. And it covers a portion of what it costs to provide that service. I don't know that it covers the entire cost, but that is passed on to the user of that EMS service. Does that answer your question, Sheridan?
Thank you, Jay. And again, I think you're emblematic of everything that I hope to see whenever I have experiences with a fire chief. So I think you all do an exemplary job. I don't think that's ever been in question. I think it's more understanding the figures. If you don't mind if I ask a follow-up, the UFA fees, I mean, what is, maybe I've missed this and it's an obvious point. What is the cost of Station 113? Like, I know what the cost would be to ELTA going forward, approximately $730,000. What is the cost of that station collectively for everyone that it services?
So the total cost of Station 113 per year is $2,140,304. And that's broken down they break it down in what it costs for staffing. So staffing Station 113 is about $1,286,000. Service delivery. So I think within the service delivery fee is, probably fuel, anything that would be associated with delivering fire and EMS service is $226,000. Support services, so all of the things that support the delivery of that service, so human resources, any kind of fees associated with our buildings, those sorts of things would all be considered support services. Our logistics, delivery, supplies, all of that. It's $473,000. And then they also have something built in for capital replacement. So over time, the replacement of our fire engines, the replacement of our ambulances, building upkeep and that sort of thing is $154,000. So all of that total together is the total that they have, what it costs per year to pay for Station 113. That's the fee that's put in. So that was the $2,140,000 fee. And so that's what it costs to have firefighters and fire apparatus and the building sitting down there just below Alta. And I guess to come up with that member fee when you are contracting with us, the way that fee was come up with was just to look, all right, where does 113 spend their time? And the way that they did that was looking at the number of calls. So the number of calls in Alta versus the number of calls everywhere else, come up with a percentage and use that percentage to apply to that total cost. And that's the fee that was come up with as far as the member fee for the town of Alta. Anything outside of Alta is they're not a member of, or they're not a contract member. They are a member of UFSA, so Snowbird and anyone else in the valley. So anywhere else just pays that tax directly to Salt Lake County, and then Salt Lake County pays it to UFA.
Yeah, and I'll just add and tell me if I don't get this right, Jay, but my understanding as a board member and having thought about this issue quite a bit is that the each station has what's called a first due area. And when that first due area is entirely within a jurisdiction like the county UFSA, then you don't have this allocation problem.
Right.
But it's when they cross boundaries. So there are stations where the first due area is both in Cottonwood Heights and in Holiday. And then they do this allocation this way between those two municipalities, or between those two municipal members, I guess I would say, of UFA, along with the UFSA, which is the fourth member.
Right. I believe that that's the method that they came up with to try to make it fair and equitable, just to say, okay, where are you spending your time? Where is your focus? Where are you being called to respond to? And based on that, divide up the cost commensurate to where you're spending your time.
All right. Thank you, Jay. I'm going to move on to my report. We're a few minutes behind. I'll try to make it quick. It's not actually all that long. I really appreciate it. Jay, if you feel like sticking around when we get to another item on our agenda, we may have another question for you if you're not having to go. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is congratulations to Mike Mon. He kind of stole my thunder. I was going to make a big deal out of his 30 years of service, but he already told us that he's been doing that. And the same with Piper. Thank you for your dedication to our community, both of you.
Harris, I
Hip,
think
hip,
you meant
hooray.
Mike Maury, not Mike Mon.
Oh, did I misspeak? I'm sorry. I meant Mike Morey. Yes, Mike Mullen. I don't know how long he's worked in our community, but that isn't who I meant to call out. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Hooray, Mike. Hooray, Piper.
Some pat on the back when you get the name wrong. I beg your pardon, Mike. Okay, so the main issue, I mean, the business of the town has been going on, of course. But the main issue is COVID, and it's been a big sponge of our attention and time. Among other things, we've been working on keeping good records so that we could ask for reimbursement under the CARES Act. That funding is, we've signed the agreement to get some funding from the county, from their allocation from Congress. It will offset a portion, but only a portion of our out-of-pocket expenses. We're going to get $11,317, which was allocated to us on a Salt Lake County per capita basis. I'm talking to the county about giving us a little bit more because on a per capita basis, shall I say, we contribute more than many other communities, thanks to our hotel, our lodges, and our ski area. What is not covered is lost revenue. And that was closing 6 weeks early was not a good thing for the balance sheet of the ski area. It was not a good thing for us. Luckily, we've been having a pretty good year up until that point. So we, in terms of 1920, did fine. And if, I know this is magical thinking, but if COVID were to go away by November, really we would have lost something in the spring and the summer, but we'll be in pretty good shape since that's not the bulk of our revenues. But like we've been talking about, that's not all that likely to happen. I have spoken with with Representative John Curtis, who is our congressperson in our district. I've spoken to Ben McAdams because I have a good relationship with him and I thought he would be amenable to the suggestion. And I have spoken with Mitt Romney. John Goldner was on all three of those calls with me. And we've advocated for the passage of a fourth recovery bill that could include money for revenue replacement, for which I'm not holding my breath, but it's possible. feel free to write your congressman, so as they say. And the language is revenue replacement. I continue to attend weekly meetings hosted by Salt Lake County on COVID. I attend meetings on COVID at the university in my role as a department chair and as somebody who, as I mentioned earlier in this meeting, is scheduled to start teaching about 2 months from now. So I've been gaining a lot of information. I've been paying a lot of attention to this. And also I've been asked to be on the steering committee of an MIT Harvard-led National Research Coordination Network on reopening the economy that's comprised mostly of economists and epidemiologists from around the country. They're particularly interested in having me be on there, both because I'm a social scientist and have this leadership role at my university, but also because I'm an elected official in a resort community, and there aren't very many people with those kind of dual roles. They're happy to have me. So I'll be boning up on what it is to on COVID. I'm familiar with a number of the issues, but I'll get better at it. On other issues, Inuit Architects has begun coordinating with John and our advisory committee, which is comprised of Sarah Gibbs, John Byrne, Tom Pollard, Nikki Lemire, and Mike Mon. They will be seeking to speak with the town council and other members of our community. The funding, as I said, was coming from impact fees and was out not from the general fund. UDOT EIS, you've already heard about that. Citizens are welcome to comment. I'll be commenting. The period runs to July 10th. On the 7th of May, I went to a UFA Finance Committee meeting where we worked on the budget, which we forwarded to the full UFA. Similarly, I'm on the Finance Committee of the CWC. That budget, like what Jay said about the UFA budget, both of them have been made more lean, partly as a result of members of the board and commissioners saying, look, all of our municipalities are trying to cut back, and we need these agencies to do this. So also, there was board meetings of both of those where the budgets were, the prior year budget was reconciled, and the next year budget was, tentative budget was approved. At the CWC meeting on June 1st, we voted to admit Brighton contingent on the set of processes that have to happen. On the 4th of June, I attended the CWC Legislative and Land Tenure Committee, and the big discussion was whether to move forward with a request to Congress directly for a directed land exchange, given the apparent collapse of a voluntary exchange based on, excuse me, based on land values. The ski areas are not in favor of this, and so I don't think this is going to happen, but there was some discussion about whether it was a good idea. On June 5th, I met with Wade Budge and the Parson Bailey lawyers trying to work out a price for our portion of the water line project in Grizzly Gulch. Explaining the tentative budget that we had accepted already to the estate lawyers made a pretty big impression on them. And I did not say to them, look, you should take the original bid amount now or forever hold your peace. What I said to them was, I still have some money from the 1920 revenues that we haven't allocated to carry over yet on a finalized budget. But that budget, that finalized budget, is going to get distributed next week. And so if you want your $45,000 before the end of the budget year, you should speak up now. And they did not. So that's where we stand. We have an outstanding undetermined obligation, and we're carrying forward a liability, but it's we put it into this budget as an $80,000 liability, but I don't expect to spend that much. But they've asked for more than that now. I attended the CWC Executive Committee meeting. I don't usually attend that because I'm not on the Executive Committee, but UDOT presented their EIS there then. Chris, I think you've told me that, I don't see your name on here, but oh, there you are. I think you've told me that we've invited them to the July meeting.
That's correct. Yeah, we had the opportunity to invite them to this meeting, but the agenda is obviously.
It was long, right? So that still gives citizens and town council members a couple days if they want to wait for that conversation directly with them in our town council meeting before the deadline to weigh in on the EIS comment period. I think I've covered pretty much everything. Oh, the UFA board asked me all its board members to take a fraud risk assessment training from the state auditor. I did that. It was actually pretty instructive. And I can share the where to find that to anybody who wants to see it. It teaches you about best practice for managing public funds. We were notified via the UFA that, just FYI, that Salt Lake County will be cutting 10% of their recreation area contribution, which comes to $3 million, and about half of that, I mean $300,000 a bigger. Their contribution's 3.1, and half and 10% of that is 310,000. I'm not exactly sure how they came up with this number, but UFA has to cut 180,000 out of their budget. There were several ideas about how to do so. One of them I argued against, which was cutting the fuels mitigation program in the canyons. The board accepted my suggestion not to cut that. I don't know if there were people who were advocating for it really anyway, but the upshot is that some capital projects are going to be delayed at the UFA. I'm not 100% sure which ones. Jay may know. It's not that important to us because it doesn't really affect us. But the Magna station was damaged, for example, during the earthquake, and I think that's one of the projects that may get delayed. Yesterday, I had a call with Trent Staggs, who's the mayor of Riverton, and an important influence on the UFA board. And he is also, as you may know, a candidate for Salt Lake County mayor. He was pretty interested in my perspective on issues in Alta, which really it's amazing to me how little people in the valley know about the complexity of transportation, land ownership, land use, sales tax dependence, environmental sensibility, and what we've done with COVID. Temporary dog authorizations issued in the last month from 5/7 to 6/10. A couple of these were continuations, and then one of them was somebody who was just here this summer. I think that's right, Jen. Paxton, Mater, York, Powder Ridge had a 30-day temporary. Jeff Selikoff, also in Powder Ridge, had a 30-day. Pam, how do you say her last name, Jen?
Labadee?
Labadee, a 30-day. She's in Powder Ridge, right? I mean in Sugar Plum, rather. Sugar Plum. And Stacy Mahan, another 30 days. So those four are the temporary licenses issued. That's it. Any comments or questions about that report? Okay. Next item on our agenda. Yeah, okay. Let's see. We do have a couple. I see that Connie Marshall and Rosie O'Grady are on the call. So I hope without objection, can we move the ACVB item 11 up and talk about that now? Before we talk about the boundary adjustment for the UFA UFSA and the emergency proclamation. Is that okay with the town council? I'm seeing nodding. Okay, so you received the draft agreement. In reading that, I noticed that a line at the bottom that I asked Polly to amend was that we could discontinue this agreement with some notice. And then there was this issue that came up with in the earlier work session discussion about the timing of disbursements. So, oh, Sarah, you're here too. I didn't acknowledge you. I just saw you popped up. So, Chris, do you want to help us on this discussion?
Sure. Yeah, I can just introduce my colleagues on the ACVB board. We've got Rosie O'Grady from the Alpha Lodge. She's the board president for this year. We have Brandon Ott from Alta Ski Area. He is, of course, I'm not sure if marketing director is the proper title for Brandon at the ski area, but he's the board secretary. And of course, Alta Ski Area is a permanent seat on the board of the chamber. We have Connie Marshall, long-standing chamber board member and, sort of a sort of progenitor of the chamber. And of course, Sarah Gibbs, who has been serving on the ACBB board for 2 years now, maybe just 1 year, but Sarah's been quite an asset to the board and her experience running one of Alpha's thriving nonprofits. It's been really helpful to have her. So, I would direct your questions about the letter we sent or, what's up with ACBB to Rosie as the president. But I think, if you have questions or comments about the letter or the agreement, or if you just want to take up the conversation we were having previously about the town's contribution to the chamber this year, we can make it a conversation. So.
Well, then let me just review a couple of thoughts then. So as all of you, I'm sure, are aware, the 2021 budget is pared down. We tried to save as much money as we could up front without really disrupting the town's operations. Part of that was a decrease in our contribution to ACVB. That is a substantial decrease. Earlier in this meeting, we had a conversation about whether, I guess I would characterize it as with the uncertainties about the ski season and the ski area opening and when it's going to open, whether even this amount of contribution is exactly the wisest thing to be doing. I suggested to Polly, our attorney, that we include a clause that allows us, if there's a necessity, to get out of the agreement. And earlier in the conversation with the town council, I reflected on something that I neglected to put into the draft contract. I realized as I was rereading it, but we could amend it, where the disbursements wouldn't come for a little while, but I don't know what your cash flow situation is as an organization. But that would allow us to hold on to the money until it was clear that one, we have it, and two, you are going to make use of it. I'm sure you have things that you'd like to say, so.
Well, I'll just speak on behalf of the ACVB. Thanks so much for giving us your time this evening. Hopefully you had a chance to read the update that the chamber sent out earlier this month, and I just kind of wanted to recap that this past year has been marked with both challenges and growth for the chamber. On a positive note, the biggest one was probably the increase in social media and digital marketing efforts we made with Sasha Patain as our marketing coordinator. We saw some positive trackable outcomes for our lodging properties with some targeted early winter and spring season campaigns. But our challenges, of course, in addition to the recent impacts of COVID on the projects that we had in the works, were also the loss of our coordinator, Sasha, and we face consistent lack of member engagement along with difficulty in recruiting board members. So as we were questioning how to fill Sasha's position, we also felt it was time to kind of take a new look at things. And similar to what you mentioned with the uncertainty of the upcoming winter season, it's definitely time to take a harder look at things. And so we hosted a strategic planning session earlier in May, and we agree that the marketing efforts of the chamber have not had the impact on the visitation that we feel that they should, and are in the process of exploring options and rethinking the model for the chamber. One of the possibilities and ideas that came up was moving lower in the funnel and targeting visitors already keen on Alta rather than trying to compete and attract new visitors. And that's when I say competing with one another as well as larger DMOs on the visitor. And so we're exploring a model more targeted towards enhancing that visitor experience once they are in Alta. With this in mind, we did identify that there is some synergy with ACE already offering an experiential programming for the community. And question, is there an avenue to work with ACE to provide something for our visitors as well? And with that in mind, we did have an initial conversation exploring with the ACE board. And again, this is just one option. What the board is looking for is input from the town, as we ultimately want to ensure that the resources targeted for the chamber result in a positive return benefiting our community and enhancing the town. So that's where we're at right now. And again, just looking for input from you.
So I want to give, should I jump in, or Brandon, Connie, Sarah, do you want to say something at this point, or? And of course, I'll ask the council members also what they. So Rosie, what kind of cash flow are you in need of between now and, the agreement draft says that we would be dispersing money to you monthly. If we were to say quarterly, that would give us a lot more information between now and September, or for example. But if you have cash flow issues, that's something that I think we would like to know.
I believe that we are okay on cash flow right now. So that quarterly distribution is definitely an avenue to explore.
Okay. Well, let me see if the council members or any of the staff have questions for you or comments on what we've just been hearing.
Thank you for that assessment, Rosie. I wondered, Connie, can you jump into, or Rosie, if you'd rather field this, can you speak to what you think ACVB has done extremely well? When I kind of field the question around town to other businesses, or just speaking and not intending in any way to be cavalier about the vision of ACVB, but the actual success in terms of revenue for the Rustler, for example, hasn't really been realized on the ground in terms of driving guests, new guests or returning guests back to the Rustler. ACVB doesn't seem to be a part of that. can you help me understand what the vision is, what you're hoping to attain with it?
Hoping to obtain with the CVB. I mean, the mission, I have to read it, Sheridan, so excuse
Oh,
me.
yeah, no worries. You're
But,
good.
Sheridan, if I can offer just a little bit of perspective, I think, you know, the ACVB was responsible for $36,000 in hotel room night bookings over the last, since 2017. And in terms of the money going into that, that's just not an acceptable ROI for the community, for the mayor, for the town. And, you know, we're really at a point where we believe, you know, Sarah and the ACE organization has really, you know, they have a vibrant, you know, vibrant programming that speaks authentically to our local community. And, you know, with a few more resources and, you know, time, that can certainly reach and enhance the visitor community as well. And, you know, provide profit. And I also think it really reduces, you know, a lot of duplicative efforts. You know, the ski area has been much more fruitful in contributing to overnight room bookings through res. So let's kind of divide and conquer and let Sarah and Ace, you know, maybe have a little bit of a louder microphone.
You know, I really appreciate that comment, Brandon. It's been, I've wondered, I've asked how much money is getting returned a couple of times over, you know, over the years. And I really appreciate your comment.
And when you look at, well, what has been the return of the chamber, and I think the chamber has had to wear too many hats, from a membership side, carrying its a voice on social, attracting, you know, interest in the valley, attracting destination visitors alike. And, you know, while the budgets have been incredibly appreciated in a large part of the, you know, town of Alta, you know, just to compete on that destination marketing level, you know, it still pales in comparison. And, you know, Alta's a unique place, and, you know, let's just put a little more fuel to the ACE fire to continue to have that stand out as, you know, a unique offering through arts and programming and the vibrancy of the experience once you arrive, and people will come back and the return will be there.
Maybe Sarah, you can say something about from the ACE side of this conversation.
I think what I should say is that the ACE and the ACE board is open to continuing this conversation on how to distribute the funds and the manner that they could be distributed. And it's not going to be solved here in these few seconds, but we are willing to continue the conversation and open to the ideas of moving forward with it.
I know, Sarah, that from my time on the ZAP Tier 2 board, that you were getting some 20,000 or so from the county. Can you let the town council know, what's your total budget?
Just about 100,000, and we get 25 from Zoo Arts and Parks, but that's going to go down, as everybody knows,
Right.
by 2 to 5%, and then other foundations as well. I think what ACE could do if we did get this funding that no longer goes to ACVB, but now goes to ACE in whatever manner we figure out to do that in, it would try to enhance the summertime experience in Alta. I always use the soiree as an example. We take the Wasatch Art Soiree, which we've done, but suddenly I have a budget for it. Instead of going from scratch and trying to get everything donated, I have a budget to get bigger names and attract people from the valley to come up and do staycations. They come to the soiree, they stay at the Alta Lodge, they stay at the Snowpine, wherever, an event chooses to be. So that way it's like arts influencing the the economics of the town of Alta.
You know, I'll let you know that this conversation, I foreshadowed this conversation in my conversation yesterday with Mayor Staggs from Riverton. He is spearheading what did he call it? Something like, you know, stay local, buy local, trying to get people to spend money locally because the sales tax revenues are so much down. If we could bring people, he's talking about the summer, and if you had some activities like that and could bring people, I don't know, is the Snow Pines planning to be open this summer?
This wouldn't be this summer, and
No, okay.
And it wouldn't just be the soiree. We would include like how to make Alta feel like a community with more public
Sure.
things like that.
No, I was just thinking about dovetailing with an effort in the valley to get people to go on a vacation for the weekend or for a couple nights in Alta this summer because things are bleak was the idea. But so Polly, if we had money in our budget but didn't have an agreement, the only thing, until we saw more of a plan, say, of what the money would be used for, we would be allocating the money, but we don't need to sign an agreement right now. We only need to have an agreement in place once we are actually dispersing money.
Correct. So you can, as part of your budget, you can allocate a certain amount of money, and then that can change and you would change your budget. Or, but yeah, you don't need, the contract would come into play when you're ready to disperse the money or services are beginning to be given.
So one thought I have is that maybe we don't have an agreement. We do leave the money in the budget because the budget balance is the way it is. And we ask you to come back to us with a plan that we can then be part of. Does that make sense to the council members and to you all from ACVB?
So what I'm hearing is ACE, ACVB, which would include Chris from the town, could come back with a plan to the town.
Yeah. Okay. So at that point we would sign the agreement based on what your plan is, and we will have earmarked the money that's in the budget today for that purpose, at least potentially.
I have a really good mural artist, mural idea.
I think it sounds like a plan that we can work within. And I would just, there's a lot of work to do. And I say this every time we get on an ACVB board call, but I mean, the developments we've discussed just in the last 10 minutes are, in order to realize those before the next town council meeting or even the August town council meeting is going to entail a whole bunch of moving bits and pieces. And I think it's going to entail a lot of time and attention and energy from the town council. I mean, for the town's economic development budget to be dispersed in a way other than the way it has been dispersed over the past decade or however long the chamber's been in its current form. That's a rare opportunity for the town council to, change policy like that or fortify it. So I just hope we can take it really seriously and come at it with good information and put our best foot forward. So I think it's a good plan, and we're basically not operating lacking an employee, and our marketing program having been terminated not only by that development but by the pandemic and the disruption of the ski season. So it's a good time. we have cash reserves in the bank. So, you know, should we decide to start a marketing program once again, we'd be able to do so for a little while. So.
Yeah, and I earlier in the work session, or maybe even in the, I can't remember, but sometime in the last couple of hours, I made the comment that I think we're going to learn a lot between now and September about what things are likely to look like between in the fall and the winter. So we'll have a much better sense of that, I think, in a few months. Council members, what do you think of just kind of postponing this this issue for now, but keeping some money available in the budget?
I think that's a good idea. There's just so many unknowns right now, and this will give ACVB a chance to hopefully come up with a plan and some things. Maybe it sounds like they're taking a good hard look at everything, and I think it's a good opportunity for us to just kind of wait. But I definitely think we should earmark everything in the budget the way we have. And then, like Margaret said earlier, we can kind of see how things go in September or October, or, you know, we can get a feel for how things are going to be, and we can always amend the budget.
Right. And, you know, one of the practices until this year was that the budget just kind of, it was this framework, and then we amended it in May all at once. But being on the UFA board has taught me that incremental changes to the budget, so that the budget is actually reflecting where you are in the year, is a sensible way to go. And so we did this in December, if I remember right, this time, for the first time that I recall having a mid-year reconciliation. And so I think we should expect to have periodic reconciliations anyway.
Yeah, and I think with COVID and everything that's going to happen that's unexpected, we're probably going to need to be on top of the budget a lot more this year, so we can get a sense of where we are at. I think we're just going to need to be much better at amending things as we go along.
Yeah, I think that's right. Margaret, I saw you wanted to say something. I know that we're getting a little bit late, so let's if you have something, but if we can wrap up this topic, that would be great. Go ahead.
It was just, the reference was to an agreement, which I never saw a draft agreement in the documents we got. I saw the letter from the ACVB. So that was the only point, was that if there was a draft agreement, I never saw it.
I didn't see it in my, I realized today that it wasn't in that same email that had the other materials. I asked for a copy just at the beginning of this meeting and got it, but that's yet another reason not to act on it today, is that we didn't have it ahead of time. Okay. I think we have a path. What do you guys think? Are we good? Good enough. Okay, good. All right. Thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So we don't need a motion of any kind to take no action, or do we need to formally postpone something, Polly?
You don't need to take any action. It's already part of your budget, so
right.
It'll be part of your budget motion.
Okay. All right, let's go back to item 9, discussion and possible action adopting a resolution approving the boundary adjustment, resolution 2020 R11. Is there a motion to adopt, and then we'll discuss?
So moved.
Okay.
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. Now let's open up some discussion. I'd like to say a couple things about some of the comments we got that I think are, I think that they don't have the best, some of the commenters don't have the full information. So one thing is that the users of emergency transport services are billed. Jay said that. I don't know that there is an alternative way to fund our fire service besides in fact, I'm pretty sure there isn't an alternative way to fund our fire services apart from remaining a member of UFA directly, which will cost the town in total about $730,000, or joining the UFSA and having the total bill be about $550,000 or 500. I'm confusing my numbers, but you've all seen them. I think there's a little bit of hopeful thinking going on with things like a $1 per skier day surcharge, because both Polly, and she can speak to this, and the lawyers at Parsons Bailey tell me that that would be an illegal sales tax. And my guess is that, and I'll ask Mike to say his opinion about that. I think that they would oppose it, and I think they have pretty well-informed legal counsel as well. So I don't see that that's an option. We don't have much headroom in our sales tax ability. We have 0.1%, which we discussed at a recent town council meeting and decided not to impose for now. But even if we did that, it would raise $60,000 or so. But it's also based on sales tax, and so would a skier day. I mean, what happens if the ski area doesn't open and they don't sell any lift tickets? Or even if they were amenable to this idea, how many skier day lift tickets do they actually sell? And how would you charge season pass holders and icon pass holders? It's a complicated problem, even if they were amenable to it. And it depends on a lot of skiers coming, which is not clear at all this year. In terms of a delay, starting on July 1st, we've been talking about this for months now, starting on July 1st, we will be incurring a bill. And that bill will come due, and the bill will be for the first 25% of $729,000. And that is not in the budget. So if we were not to go forward with this, we will need to have a different budget, and we will need to raise the money the only way that I think we can, which is to increase our property taxes. Because the number 729 is greater than the number of 550, we will have to raise our property taxes by a greater amount than the UFSA levy would charge us. To the question of why are there two different amounts, the answer is the 729 is based on usage patterns relative to the other usage in the first due area in the other jurisdiction. We can decrease that usage pattern by using Gold Cross. That is possible. It would not show up in our allocation for a couple of years if we decreased our use by, say, 50% of the emergency calls into Alta. It would take a couple of years for that to flow into our 3-year average usage, which is how that's calculated by the UFA. So it doesn't address very well the problem of raising that money this year. That's how the 729 comes up. Why is it 550 if we join the district? It's because it's a socialist model and we would be being subsidized essentially. We would be getting, although it's not as big of a subsidy as we were getting from the county through the recreation area contribution, we're still getting a contribution of about $170,000 from the UFSA members, that is to say, the taxpayers in those communities, compared to if we went with the direct membership. I am sensitive to questions of social justice. I have dedicated my career to public service, not by being the mayor or the town council member for the last 8 years, but since I got my PhD in 1990, or since I started graduate school in the mid 80s, I've been dedicated to issues of fairness and justice. One of my areas of research and expertise is the psychology of allocation and the psychology of procedural fairness. Where does justice live in this particular question? I am not sure. To the taxpayers in Midvale, they would like us to pay the same rate for the same kind of service that they have. The service isn't emergency transport. The service is having a fire station in our community. If Alta were, if that fire station weren't being paid for by a recreation area contribution from the county, previously accounted to our usage, but going forward being accounted just to Snowbird and the rest of the canyon's usage, if that $3.1 million or the million or so that is allocated to Little Cottonwood Canyon didn't exist, we would not have a fire station in our community. We would be waiting for service to come up out of the valley. Is that worth it? Maybe today, if we were designing the system, we would say no. My guess is that patrons to our ski area expect an ambulance to show up in a timely manner. A handful of times a year, Dr. Ken Libre tells me he needs the expertise of the paramedics at UFA and not just the transport that Gold Cross could do. Mostly what we're buying is insurance for when the sugar plum explodes, it doesn't burn down the whole part of town. And we can have a multi-alarm fire where I think it was 8, Jay, you can correct me. There were vehicles and personnel from other fire stations that came up to help our community, both with Hellgate and with that fire. So to me, we have to have a fire department. I know people are angry with me. I did not create this situation. I have spent hundreds of hours thinking about this situation, and I think there are 2 viable, achievable solutions. Finally, people do have an opportunity to object. The number of people who have objected falls below the threshold that would be necessary to abort this, ratifying this agreement. So that's what I have to say.
Do you want input in terms of legal analysis of whether you can, whether it's viable to charge a user fee on the ski lift passes?
I don't, but maybe somebody else does.
I would like to hear that, Polly. There was some suggestion months ago about the idea of putting some sort of an additional fee, and I know that there was a discussion that we couldn't tax them, that would be illegal, but whether there was an insurance or some other mechanism, and that my recollection was that you said additional research would need to be done, and I didn't know that any such research had ever been authorized or pursued, and so I would be interested in hearing what you've learned.
Yeah, so I have looked into it and also have consulted with other municipal attorneys on this. And basically, so Utah is very unusual. We're very limited in terms of taxation and fees. And if towns are allowed to charge fees, but they need to be very narrowly based. So if a fee is for something which has a general application to the whole township, or not township, but town, municipality, then it's viewed as a tax. And it's been interesting because, and I can send you a copy of the case, but there was just a case in the 4th District Court down, which is Utah County, Pleasant Grove, which tried to implement a transportation utility fee. And the court there found that a fee that would have helped improve a road system that the city of Pleasant Grove had imposed was illegal because it was found to be a general benefit rather than a specific benefit to those who pay the fee. So I think that where we would get tripped up, and then so that was found in the 4th District Court. My understanding is that it is being appealed, but that'll be at least, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months before it's even heard by the Court of Appeals. So it would be ripe for litigation if we were to impose such a fee. And the precedent, at least from the 4th District Court, is that those type of fees are considered taxes. It would be different if it was something that was only going, if it was a service that was only going to those who say were on the Alta ski lifts land, or who, you know, if there are some people that were only using a water system or something like that, then it's narrowly tailored to what the fee is for. But the fact is that even though the majority of EMS calls are related to skiers, everybody benefits from the fact that you have fire service. And, you know, as I've been, my journey and kind of listening about this whole issue has evolved somewhat, I think, because I think it's a bit of a red herring to focus on the EMS portion, because really what we're getting is fire service, and there's no other real way to get fire service. And the EMS is a bonus that comes with it. And is the reason why it is such a red herring is because that is the formula that the UFA has been using to determine what is our portion of the cost for the fire station. But if we want fire service, I don't know how else you can get it. The UFA is not willing to only provide fire service and not EMS service. So, you know, if they offered that, then we could try to figure out a way to do that, but that doesn't seem to be something that's on the table. But the bottom line is that while it's a creative idea and it is used in other jurisdictions outside of Utah, Utah law is very restrictive when it comes to fees and taxes, and my legal opinion is that there would be a huge risk of litigation that has at least right now, based on the 4th District Court's precedent, until the Court of Appeals looks at it, that would be costly to defend.
If we go, just let me add one thing, Margaret, excuse me. If we go into the UFSA, we'll never have to talk about usage patterns.
So if instead somehow we could characterize it, and maybe that's a pejorative term in this circumstance, but if we could characterize it as an insurance versus a tax or a fee, what difference is there in terms of the municipality being able to apply it? I mean, we know that when you go rent a car, you can choose to buy the insurance or you can choose not to buy the insurance, and then any consequences flow to you based upon how you choose to do that, whether you sign a waiver or whether you don't. Is there anything like that that is available to the municipality in that regard?
You know, my understanding of that, you know, I know that, for example, in Europe, you can buy a cartonnage, right? It's like snow card, right? That basically, if you need helicopter rescue, you pay a couple of euros and you get this coverage. But and if you don't pay for that, I guess the helicopter still comes, but then you're stuck with a bill of the cost of the helicopter. But what we're talking, the service that's being provided here is a municipal service. So we don't, someone comes to your house, you might get the bill for the ambulance transport, but we provide the service, and I guess I don't know what happens if you don't pay it, but that's a service that the fire service provides and that the town provides. If there were two competing, just like Life Flight, I mean, if Life Flight is needed, it comes, right? So I don't think that we can somehow designate that this is an insurance that you have to pay for. And then if you don't have that insurance, you all of a sudden owe $20,000 because you called an ambulance. Plus you have the other conflict of the fact that the service that the fire services that the UFA is providing isn't just EMS service, it's fire service. So if there's a fire in your home, they're going to come, and it's the same providers. There's no way to segregate it out. I mean, I don't know if Jay wants to speak to that at all, but you get the whole package with it.
Yeah, so that's how the service is provided, and it's provided that way throughout the valley. So Unified Fire Authority holds the license from the state of Utah to provide 911 emergency medical service. And there's not a competing entity in any geographical area that is allowed to provide that same service. So it would be like similar to having two police departments in one area and saying, all right, they're going to compete against each other. So there is a sole holder of that particular license to provide that service within a geographical area. Now, the talk about utilizing Gold Cross for a portion of those transports, utilizing Gold Cross does not hold the 911 ambulance service license. And so those transports, when you utilize Gold Cross, are considered to be non-911 calls, or what we would refer to as an interfacility transport. So they're not necessarily emergent. They can be managed. You have time to call and schedule a transport, and in some cases that could happen, where maybe a patient is stable and they don't need to have somebody there within 5 minutes. But it's two separate licenses, and you would not be able to say, all right, we're going to use another entity for our ambulance service. Unified Fire is the entity that you can use for 911 service in your geographical area, and that will not change. It's just I guess what you're deciding is how you pay for that.
I'm going to address another suggestion, which was charging for parking. And here, Mike Mon probably has an opinion about that too. A quick survey of the town's parking availability that I conducted with the staff the other day after seeing that comment indicates that of the, I don't know how many parking spaces we have in total. Chris, what did we decide, at 1,500 or something? I don't remember.
Mike Mon might know better, but I believe it's between 2,000 and 2,500 in the canyon, and we have about half of them in.
Okay. So the town of Alta owns ground that has something like 50 or 100 parking spots on it. Almost all the rest of it is on the special use permit of the ski area. There's a little bit that's not on the special use permit and not owned by the town. But we would have to, so we don't have the right to charge on a special use permit holder's lot, is my understanding. And if we were to charge on our own, let's say we charge $50 a day, our 50 or 100 spots would be the absolute last ones occupied. And so to make any money on it, we'd have to charge $1,000 a day, because there'd only be a handful of days where people would be forced to do that. And I'm pretty sure that people would find ways to object to that. So I just don't find that to be a viable alternative way of doing this. There are 2 sales taxes that we could levy, and we've talked about them, and I talked about them in my memos. There's 0.1% sales tax that we could apply across the board, and there's a transient room tax that in a typical year would bring us $100,000 to $130,000. This coming year, both of those could yield 0 for all we know, even if we thought they were good ideas, which the town council so far has not.
And we're in a pickle. I think you've done a great job researching this, Harris, and Margaret, you as well, everyone on the council, everyone weighing in. Polly, I appreciate your legal advice. I think that the short, flat truth of it is that no one really wants to pay for this, and yet it's enormously expensive, and we all agree we need it. The choice is between UFSA's costs or UFA's cost, or alternatives that haven't really been floated, like restarting our own volunteer fire department, which we could do, which for more than $500,000 a year in 10 years could buy us the staff and the fire equipment to do. So I think that's a real possible, viable, potential solution. I also think, frankly, the people who are profiting from receiving this service most, including the lodges, including the ski lift company, should come up with ways to shoulder some of the expense that is more proportionate to the actual usage. I think that's fair. If I'm not in your seat, Mike, but if I were, I think it's reasonable that the ski lift company would pay more for this. I think it's reasonable that the lodges should probably have that transient room tax, because it's our guests and it's ski lift guests that are causing most of the calls and most of the expense for this. I really don't understand why there's a battle about that at all.
Well, I don't think that most of the expense of having a fire department is in fact the emergency transport. It's having a fire station ready to respond to whatever they need to respond. But John, you did an analysis today about the commercial properties versus the residents and who will be shouldering this burden. Can you share that, please?
Well, I can't, there's something, I've got the very slow internet here and I was trying to pull it up. So the numbers will be wrong, but it was something like the difference in value.
Well, I've got it. Hold on a second.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Let me just get to it.
Because that was a question
I'm going to share my screen so that people can see this assessment. Okay, so John, walk us through this. What you've got here are 3 large rows. This is the taxable value of residential real estate.
2019, because we talked about this a couple of months ago, I guess it was April, the difference between the residential and the other property. So residential is like $71.5 million. The commercial is $225,000.
We're talking about these 2 numbers here.
Correct. And the personal,
so
personal property is like other things that like the ski area may own that is taxed.
Like lifts or something.
And equipment.
Okay. So just in terms of the real estate that is going to be subject to this tax, right?
Correct.
Our residents have a total value of $71.5 million to be taxed, while our businesses have a $224 million value that will be taxed. So in fact, it's going to be the businesses that are paying the bulk of this cost. That's not to say it doesn't raise the price of owning property in Alta. Part of the problem, so to speak, is that our residences are worth a lot of money compared to some other places, or at least maybe we don't agree with the assessments, but they're assessed at on average $1 million. And I'm sure that the residences in Midvale are not assessed at an average of $1 million. That's part of where this is coming from.
Right, and we do not do those assessments.
No, we don't have anything to
field
do
those
with
calls
this.
all the time. So you can get a much bigger house and a much bigger lot downtown for much less money, but that's not something we do. And we have been protesting those things with the county assessor for years. Even brought him up to our meetings to explain to people how to protest those valuations. So that part is out of our hands.
So I don't know. I would like to call a question so that we're 20 minutes past our time. Would that be acceptable to people? Okay, so where is this resolution? Let's see. Is that a PDF, Piper? Do you have the resolution in front of you? Can you name it, please?
I can, I have it up. It's, I might be able to share a screen. It's 2020-R-11.
Yeah, and the title of it is what? That's what I want to make sure that we get right in the record.
Approving an adjustment to the boundary of the service area to include all of the town. Town of Alta Resolution number 2020-R-11 and the Unified Fire Service Area, approving an adjustment to the boundary of the service area to include all of the town.
Okay. Right. Yes, I found it. Okay. So, okay. Thank you. All those in favor of passing this resolution, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Cliff, you want to vote?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Did you hear me? I thought I went first. Aye.
No, I didn't hear you until just then, but now I do. Thank you. Okay, those opposed, please say no.
Nay.
And any abstentions?
I'm going to abstain because the resolution indicates that there are insufficient objections July 21st at the UFSA public hearing, which obviously hasn't occurred yet.
Okay. All right, thank you. We have, as of now, there has not been sufficient objection to prevent this body from ratifying this resolution. Okay, the next item is the discussion and possible action regarding extension of emergency proclamation number 1. That is resolution 2020-R12.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to leave the meeting now, but if my vote is needed, Jen Clancy is able to call me.
Thank you for your participation.
From a rest stop on eastbound Interstate 84 in Oregon. Thank you all, and I'll see you soon.
Okay, enjoy your vacation.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Take care. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay, I can show this resolution.
Harris, can I propose a 2-minute nature break? Since it looks like we still have another 6 items.
Well, I certainly appreciate that.
Nay.
I know. I'm supposed to be making dinner for my family because this was scheduled till 7. Let's see.
Right,
What
well,
can?
if you want to press on, I will leave if I need to.
Okay,
Don't say press on.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so this resolution would be extending the state of emergency. Is there a, I'll move that we adopt this. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me put it up on screen, and also let me make it a little bit smaller so more of it is visible at once. Okay, so you all saw this, whereas the way this is written, that the town council consents and extends the local emergency in the term until it is terminated either by the town council or by the mayor. And then it just has places for signature on the second page. Discussion?
So I just want to, so we're removing the 30-day part and we're doing what some other municipalities are doing and just kind of having a open-ended, is that what we're doing?
The default is it would continue until discontinued.
Okay.
That's right, Polly, right?
Yeah, and so the original 30-day trigger was one. So once it goes beyond 30 days, the council needs to approve it. It goes out of the mayor's control and the council needs to approve it. But then after that, you as a council can determine that it goes on until either you terminate it or rescind it, or the mayor terminates or rescinds it.
And what we've been doing up until now is just having it extend to the day following the town council meeting so that we could extend it without it expiring. But it's really a matter, I guess, of convenience to reverse the default.
My only comment about it, Harris and Council, was whether or not, I know that you've gotten a lot of heat from people about the resolution. And so the question was whether or not we put in that first section language that removal by the mayor with the advice and consent of the council or town council resolution as a way to show that the council itself is supporting the decisions that you're making to extend or to revoke. I don't know if that. So I don't know if we need a motion on that. I don't know what effect that would have, but I'm trying to suggest that the council is supporting the decisions that the mayor's making by that statement.
So if I understand you correctly, you would say hereby extended until it is terminated by either the mayor with the advice and consent of the town council or by resolution of the town council.
Correct. That's my suggestion.
So really, we don't need this either. It's terminated by the mayor. I guess the or makes it so that you could do it even if I didn't want to. I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So by either them. All right. So.
So that's my motion, is to amend that section 1 with the language that you've just stated, that it would be terminated by either the mayor on advice and consent of the town council or by resolution of the town council.
I'd second that. Is there a motion on the table?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I was typing. I forgot to ask for a second. Okay, Margaret, take a look at what I just did.
Yeah, I think that captures exactly what I was intending.
Okay, Polly, you have any objection to that as a legal matter?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay, all right. Let me. Elise, you want to say anything about that amendment?
No, it sounds great.
Okay, let me call the question on the amendment to resolution 2020 R12. All those in favor of Margaret's amendment as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that's all. Margaret, I didn't actually hear you, but I assume you voted for your own amendment.
I did.
Yeah. Okay. So there's none opposed. Okay. So now let's vote on the underlying resolution as amended 2020 R12. Are all those, is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the amended resolution R12, please say yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda we have dealt with. Okay, the 1920 budget is resolution R13, discussion and possible action amending the 2019-2020 budget. I'll move that we approve resolution R13, adopting the the reconciled budget.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Okay, hearing Sheridan, it looks like you want to talk, but you are muted. Or are you talking to somebody else?
Dang nabbit. Sorry.
Okay.
Not to belabor it, but I still don't understand why we are paying UDOT for the use of our community center area and that bay. And the communications efforts, I guess.
We're not paying them, they're paying us. Which line are you talking about? Okay.
That's what I wanted clarification on. Thank
So
you.
it's in the revenue section. These documents don't make it obvious where revenues stop and expenditures begin. So,
No thanks.
where is that line, Piper? Can you point to that line, please?
1036, sorry, let me pull it up. Sorry. It's in the 10 revenue, 1036 is my guess, but
I can tell you.
700, 12,000 in the revenue side.
No, there's contributions and transfers below that. So it's 1039 is the final category, Sheridan, of revenues.
You're looking for the line, it's 1036, 700 under miscellaneous revenue. There's 12,000 from UDOT there.
Right, but where is the break between revenues and expenditures? It's a 1039 after 1041 is the first expenditure line.
Yes.
And it's not clear on these documents that Cassell generates. Sheridan, I have to scroll through it every time. Okay. Any other concerns about this amended budget? Okay, so all those in favor of adopting, of approving resolution, adopting resolution 2020 R13, accepting the amended 2019-2020 budgets, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, I don't think there are any opposed. Thank you. Okay, we need to, we don't know about water rates, right? So we're going to postpone this issue.
Right.
Okay. See, there aren't as many items left, Margaret, as it looked like.
Hurry up.
Okay. Discussion and possible action adopting final budget 2020 R15. Now, remember, we can amend this further. And presumably, and I'll say this to Margaret's comment about the July UFA board meeting, presumably if sufficient objections arrive and we cannot ratify this agreement with UFSA to expand their boundary, we will be back right away amending this budget because we can't possibly pay for fire service out of this budget. So since I'm trying to push us along, I'm going to make the motion that we adopt resolution 2020 R15, adopting the budget as submitted by Piper.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Okay, hearing none.
Oops, sorry, one question. So legal fees kind of spiked this year, and that's built into next year's budget. But should we, is it safe to assume, is it really necessary to assume that that should stay at that sort of higher level?
I actually think we lowered the legal fees in some categories, and a good portion of that $11,000 that is getting reimbursed, or maybe a little bit more that's getting reimbursed, are the increased legal fees that the COVID pandemic has engendered. Polly has promised not to raise her rates, just like we're not raising anybody's salaries. And to the extent possible, there are a couple of issues that I have asked Parsons Bailey to weigh in on, and particularly the land use stuff with the Schron's estate, because they've been involved with that right from the get-go. But Polly's rates are lower than Parsons Bailey's charges us. We base that basically on what we've been spending this year.
And in the tentative budget, I think we did try to shave some money off of that, but then seeing what April, May, and June have brought, we thought it prudent to put it back in there. So.
And we may well need it. I just, you know, there's still so many unknowns. That's one thing I was looking at and wondering, should we really always peg it at that higher level?
We don't have to spend it.
Yeah, and we can adjust it again, as we were saying.
Well, I guess that's one of my questions too, is could we go to the retainer model rather than an hourly model as a way to have more concrete what our costs are going to be?
Okay, that's an excellent idea.
I don't mind having more predictability, but that is, I think, a conversation that we'll have to have. I mean, I don't think we're ready to make that decision right this minute. Like Polly would have to think about what that would be, for example.
And hopefully it wouldn't be like the UFSA, because we have predictability there, but people aren't happy with that predictability. It's late enough for me to start getting in trouble.
Fair enough. Why don't I commit to having that conversation with both sets of attorneys? It's never, in my experience in 8 years, I haven't seen it. I don't know that we've had that in a long time, but I don't know.
And I'm open to having that conversation. I understand the need for the predictability. So.
Okay. One thing that's been nice about the hours billed model, Margaret, is that we have been including in our accounting a COVID category, and you have to be able to show those costs. So just for an example, let's say we budgeted $50,000 for legal fees, and for whatever reason, we only spent $25,000. But 5 of that 1,000 was COVID. We did ask for that 5,000 back. Whereas if we had budgeted $25,000 on retainer, I don't know that we'd be able to ask for that back, because it has to be what they call an unexpected expense. Now, the CARES Act runs through the end of 2020. It's not a forever thing.
Yeah, unless you get what you were advocating for with the legislators, that we get a fourth.
Well, that would be for lost revenue, which is
right.
Another issue, which I don't know how you would document. It's hard to document what didn't happen, to explain why what didn't happen. So
right.
And I think actually, although Harris and the mayor and I can discuss this if we talk about a retainer, is I think that legal fees were below budget prior to COVID,
Yes,
just for your information.
yes. Yeah, we had felt it prudent to budget sufficiently in the legal fees because we don't know when we're going to have a problem, like working out a water line issue with the Sean's estate, or having the ski area sue us because we try to impose a $1 surcharge on their lift tickets. Just to take a couple examples, one hypothetical and one real. Or damages because Mike breaks his 30-year history and actually has to tear gas somebody or something, you know? I mean, Mike Mon that time.
No.
Okay, I'm starting to get a little lightheaded out of being hungry. Okay, is there further discussion? Okay, then I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of adopting the final budget.
Sorry, Harris. The last question was having to do with that impact fee, the $75,000 for the feasibility study. You said it's earmarked, and so it couldn't be spent for other things. But should that necessarily mean that it should be in the budget now versus staying in the capital projects fund or something else and not doing it now? I understand that you wanted to, as part of your term in office, get the community center project advanced, that was a commitment you made in running for office. But I'm just wondering if, as a council, we want to continue to include that. And I recognize we can amend the budget later, but I'm wondering if maybe now's the time to say, let's wait a couple months and decide if we still want to do that or not. So
there's two other things. Part of the reason why I decided to go ahead with that, using the money that had been allocated, and then actually figuring out a way to use other money, was to give our community something. This was in the depths of March and April, to give us something positive to think about. That was actually one of the motivations too. We actually have a contract with them at this point because we ran a process of having a contract. So I'm sorry, John.
Oh, sorry, one more thing. And in that contract, and I'm sure there's escape clauses because of COVID and who knows what, but in that we started, and it's been started pretty positively, but in that contract, they didn't want anything to do with the avalanche things. So we broke the avalanche out for $6,000, and that's a separate thing that we've had some people submit proposals. We're kind of winnowing them down, and at least we would go ahead with that. But
which, the 6,000 or the non-6?
The 6,000. I mean, because those guys are ready to go forward. They put a lot of work in. Both parties have put a lot of work into this. So now it's the feasibility study and the avalanche study. So I didn't mean to derail you, Harris, but.
No, that was perfect.
Yeah, I think it's been approved in the impact fund plan.
5-year
That's
plan.
not the right word for it. It's not a plan, but I think the best thing to do is to spend that. To tell you the truth, the fund is adding up and the time is adding up, and it's best to use that money and spend it.
Is there further discussion? Okay, well, all those in favor of adopting 2020 R15, our final budget, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Oh, Sheridan said yes. Anybody opposed?
Margaret.
Okay, Margaret is opposed, so this carries 3-1. Okay, what is the Alta Special Service District budget? That is 0, right?
Correct.
Yes, 0.
So can you quickly explain why we're doing this?
In order to keep it viable.
Okay, and why do we want the Special Service District?
John, can you speak to that?
It's like a placeholder when the Blackjack annexation, which includes Blackjack Village subdivision, Blackjack, Potter Ridge, not Potter Ridge, and all of the Sugar Plum, they elected to get their sewer and water from the service area. So we broke them off from us. We created another service area, service district for the entire town except for that area if we were going to do something else. So we've never used it. It's difficult to see how we'd use it, but we've never had a budget. We just did something for a whole district without that area, without the overlapping service district area.
John, can you answer a question I had that I think in the resolution it says who the chairman or the president is of that board? Do you remember who else is on that committee, that board?
But, oh, on our special?
On the special service district that does not have a budget.
It's the council.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't.
Okay, so there's a 0 budget, 0 expenses, 0 income, 0 revenues from that. It just allows us to continue to have this if it proves useful to us at some point, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I move we adopt continuing CTR 2020 R16.
A second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that was unanimous. Thank you. Okay, then there's a discussion on possible adoption of the council meeting schedule, ordinance 2020-001?
Yes, it's an ordinance. Polly said it.
01.
So it's
No, 01. That's a 0.
Yeah, state law requires
I see, it's
that
an
your
ordinance.
annual meeting schedule be an ordinance. It's strange language, but that's what
01
it
is
is.
01.
That's an O or a 0?
It's an O for ordinance.
I see. Okay.
The
Got it.
first one of the year.
Okay.
Motion.
I move that we adopt the 2021 council meeting schedule.
I'll second that. Okay, good. Any discussion?
I'd like to propose that if we are going off kind of virtual meetings, that in the winter, assuming we are able to meet, that November through April not start so late, so that people, as your situation and mine is now, have an opportunity to get home and make dinner. So for those meetings, if we're not Zooming them, I would propose that they happen earlier in the day. So whether it's at 2 or 3 or whatever works for the rest of the group.
So what we decided mid-year was that we would always schedule a work session at 4 and a town council meeting from 5 to 7. Today we violated our timing rules, but it's kind of the wrap up for the fiscal year. My sense was that the afternoon actually worked pretty well. At least we didn't have any complaints about interlodge like we did the year before. What if we moved it from 4 to 3 and from 5 to 4 respectively? So move it up by an hour.
And is that for every meeting or just seasonal, Harris?
No, I think the seasonal is what Margaret was suggesting, and that would make sense to me. I actually, hold on a second. I just have to look and see when I'm teaching and what my time of day of fall. No, I would be okay even if even if they hold class.
So I don't know what, I mean, obviously Cliff isn't here, so I don't know how this would impact him to change the meeting schedule. So I don't know, maybe if we're going to propose that kind of a change, maybe that needs, well, I guess we have to do something now in order for it to be there, and then we modify it in July if we need to.
You can
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, your code requires you to adopt this in June, so you need to do it, but you can always amend it.
Okay. Let's
excuse me, Margaret, on the clarification, November through March or April?
I put April.
Okay.
But I mean, I could adjust that motion if that's not what other people are interested in, rather than having multiple amendments. Or
Jen?
I would just be consistent throughout the year. I think that that's going to cause confusion of when it stops and ends. I don't think it's a big enough of a time shift. That's just my opinion, to be consistent. And I'm happy to call Cliff.
Are people amenable to that idea, Margaret, and everybody else? I mean, that's okay with me. I will occasionally, let's see, the November, there are likely to be 3 town council meetings that I can still get back to Alta by 3, even if I'm teaching until 1, which is this Wednesday schedule that I have.
I mean, that's okay for me. I don't know about Elise and Sheridan in terms of their schedules and work and so on. So
I do have a problem on the 12th, however, of August. I was scheduled to teach until 5. I guess I have a problem anyway, even with a work session. So I'll have to figure out how not to do that. I'll have to teach.
oh, I just got a message from Sheridan that somehow she got lost and she's trying to reconnect. So
okay.
It looks like Jen's on the phone with Cliff.
How can you tell who she's talking to?
She said she was going to call him.
Oh, okay.
She's a good lip reader.
I missed that part of the conversation, but yes, I was talking to Cliff, and he said he would be okay as long as he's not the tiebreaker.
No, he's not. He's not a tiebreaker in this case, I don't think. Elise, you're okay with that or not?
Yeah, I do agree with Jen, though. I don't think that we should be doing different times at different months of the year. I think having a consistent schedule is something that the biggest complaint we get about sometimes on the planning commission is that they don't have a consistent schedule. So I feel like we should be able to do that. So I'm okay moving to 3 o'clock. It's just that I just think we should do it the whole year, not just for certain months.
I will say that other municipalities and our legally required like truth and taxation meeting, they have to be in the evening because the presumption is people work during the day. And so while it may be more convenient for town council members, the presumption in most communities as to why to have these meetings in the evening, which was part of our idea about 5 o'clock, because it would be after Elise's work hours in particular, but is to try to increase the ability of people to come. I don't know. I think people won't come on a powder day at 3, right? And they probably wouldn't come at 4, but they could come at 5.
No, but on a powder day, there's no powder left at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock.
Oh, no. That's not on a storm day, which is the best.
You haven't heard of the power hour, Margaret?
Yeah. No.
What? I didn't hear that, Piper.
The power hour from 3 to 4 or 3:30 to 4:30, right?
I have spent time on a chairlift between 3:30 and 4:30 with Jen Clancy.
Well, I got to be on Sunnyside by 4:30 or I am walking home. So that's the problem for me. I don't get that extra hour.
I'm fine keeping the schedule the way it is, or we could change it, to 4 o'clock town council meeting. I just think we need to be consistent through the year.
All right, Margaret, so how would you like to make a motion to amend the motion before us to meet it from 4 to 6?
Yeah, I just texted Sheridan and asked her if she could do the town council at 3 p.m. and she said yes, but that was the sum total of my question. I didn't say the whole year or whatever, so yeah. I don't know that that's reliable. But so I move that we amend the town council meeting schedule for 2021 to start the work session at 3 and the town council meeting at 4.
Elise?
The only thing is if we do that, how does that work for our truth and taxation hearing? Would we have to have a town council meeting that starts at 4 and then the truth and taxation hearing would have to then start at 5? We would have to stop the town council meeting? I think it
has to be after 6.
We're not having a truth and taxation hearing.
No, I know,
but
we
might.
May down the road.
Well, we might have one this year.
It happens. It would only be possible to happen once a year.
Once.
And it's usually in
August.
Okay.
Always in August.
Okay.
And I think that's the only hearing that requires it to be at 6 p.m. by statute. But even like the budget hearing doesn't have a requirement of what time. So that would be the only time that it would.
I think there's a required, I think we get imposed a time for our election canvassing.
Oh, that's possible. Mm-hmm.
No. It has to be in a certain window, but it's not a certain time of day or a certain date.
Well, we could amend it later if it turns out we have to do something in August that doesn't meet with what the schedule that we've scheduled for the year.
Right. Okay.
There's
so
an amendment.
It's been seconded. So.
Well, it needs to be second.
I'll second it.
Yeah, it needed a second. Okay. Hi. We're talking. There's an amendment before us on the schedule for the meeting schedule to have work session start at 3 and town council meeting start at 4.
Aye.
Okay. All else who are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And Cliff said aye on that, so we're good to go. Okay. I'll just say one thing about new business and then let's go have dinner. I was asked to investigate how the town of Alta, what the process for disincorporation is. And I will do that and I will report back.
Can you say by who?
A citizen is all I want to say right now. I thought it's a reasonable request. I will tell you that at our current burn rate of funds, we estimate with no revenue from the lodges or the ski lifts that we would we will be insolvent in May. Now, between now and then, we would try and figure out ways not to be insolvent, even if in that worst case, which is part of, for example, the delay of the ACVB, but that's not enough money really. So anyway, it seems like a worthwhile exercise to learn about and another way to increase our legal fees, frankly.
Yeah.
That'll help a lot to keep the legal fees down.
Right. All right. What do you think about adjourning, everybody? Is that a motion, Elise?
Yeah, that's a motion.
I'll second it. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, none opposed. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Thank you. Good
Aye.
job. Thank you very much.